There's something very weird about Netflix reality shows. I realize that isn't a particularly groundbreaking thing to say. I feel like, especially since they made Squid Game into a real game show, most people have kind of been like, hey, why are you like this? I will say that I do, however, have high hopes for the dating show adaptation of Leave the World Behind. Apparently it's got a real Survivor meets Big Brother meets pulling all of your own teeth out of your mouth vibe. And while, yes, it is undeniably horrifying watching a cancer survivor in serious medical debt weep as his hopes for financial salvation slip away because he lost a game of red light, green light. But to me, though, what's really dark about that scene is the fact that if you know much about the other reality shows in Netflix's catalog, I'm not even sure if Squid Game makes the top 10 worst shows they've ever made. Like, don't get me wrong, the show is very tasteless, shocking, and more than a little dystopian, but also, on a basic level, all that's really happening on the show is people competing at schoolyard games for money. By Netflix's standards, that's downright wholesome. Like, this is the company that made Awake. Do you know what that is? So, they make these people sit in a room and count quarters for 24 hours straight, no sleep. Round one is they have to keep track of how many quarters they counted in their heads, and the two people who are off by the most are eliminated. Then, the rest of the show is just them having to do things that sleep deprivation is known to make you worse at, while a studio audience laughs at them. Look how easily this dumb is getting a brain freeze, a thing that apparently sleep deprivation makes you more susceptible to. Squid Game isn't their most dystopian reality show either. I'd say that title is a bit of a toss-up between Too Hot to Handle, a dating show hosted by an omnipotent AI who hates sex, or Stay Here, a home renovation show where none of the houses will ever be lived in, but instead will just be rented out on Airbnb, both of which I've made videos about. But the thing is that this isn't actually what's weird to me about these shows. It's subtle, but I think that the thing that makes Netflix reality shows different is how, despite these deranged premises, they all still wind up feeling oddly hollow. Like, despite everything I've just said, when you watch these shows, for the most part, I don't really feel like they come off as being made by someone evil. It's more that they're giving, like, pleasure dystopia run by an algorithm. To give you an idea of what I mean, let's look at some shows that were made by other networks. So, my girlfriend and I recently started watching Vanderpump Rules from the beginning. The show originally aired on Bravo, a fact that's not all important, but I have to mention it in order for this video to qualify for fair use. Vanderpump Rules follows the lives of the front of house staff at SUR, a restaurant in LA owned by Lisa Vanderpump, one of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. The entire cast is unbelievably dumb and horrible to each other in a way that feels like they've all died and are being forced to be around each other as part of an ironic punishment in hell.
You threw water on me last night. You told me I'm a and you hate me.
Are you kidding me? I hate myself. I don't know what you want from me, you guys. Katie, don't leave.
In the first season, we're introduced to Sheena, a new server who we learn is trying to be a pop star, and she's not good.
Can you freak, bitch?
At first, this all came off to me as funny, but also, like, rough. You know, she seems very delusional and isn't that talented, but is apparently spending all this money buying beats and paying for studio time.
You're too tight! Need to loosen up! It's gonna be a hit, but you have to relax!
Alright.
Moon River Rock! Moon River Rock! It just seems like a bad situation. And this isn't a one-off thing either. While it's not the only thing that's going on with her, Sheena's singing keeps coming up throughout the show, with episodes where her coworkers come to her live performances, or her getting them to blast her one song on repeat for hours as part of the surf float in the LA Pride Parade.
How many times are we gonna hear your song? It's 44 times looped, and then we'll probably play it twice.
Which is a hilarious thing to do if you hate everyone that you work with.
Go yourself.
Go kill yourself.
But then a couple seasons later, this whole picture of her changes when she explains,
I'm happy doing music. It's fun. It's more of a hobby. I can put out good music.
Can you freak, bitch?
Mission accomplished.
and Anna, that's obviously an extremely expensive and unrelatable hobby, but also realizing that this wasn't her weird delusion and instead just something she likes to do for fun was oddly intimate and humanizing. Off the top of my head, I don't really know if I've seen many reality shows that go this deeply into the mundane ins and outs of one of the cast members' hobbies, you know? I honestly thought it was really endearing. Or on that note, let me give you another example from a different show. This one is the kind of unequivocal crime against God that you only really see from the Learning Channel. I'm speaking, of course, about MILF Manor. By the way, if you're new to this channel and are wondering when I'm going to talk about Love is Blind, I'm getting to it, and also I wish I could say that my intros aren't always this long. Sorry. The premise of MILF Manor is that they get 8 single women between the ages of 40 and 60 who like dating younger men, and then bring in 8 guys between the ages of 20 and 30 who like dating older women. One of the things they do, which is a surefire sign that something horrible is going to happen, is that they claim that the show is a social experiment. In the first episode, they say how it's all about breaking down sexist double standards in society.
In the real world, there is often a double standard where an older man with a younger woman is accepted, but an older woman with a younger man isn't.
It's like, yeah, that's a fair point. There is kind of a double standard there, but also, I'm not trying to judge anyone's relationships or whatever, but when I hear about an older man dating a woman who's like 20 to 30 years younger than him, I think that that's bad, right? Like, it can depend. There's other factors, you know. I'm not saying that all relationships with big age gaps are horrible necessarily, but I feel like at least 40% of them are. You know, just like conservatively estimating. I know that by wading into age gap discourse, I'm gonna get a bunch of people in the comments saying how an 18-year-old is an adult and so it's not a crime, and that is true. So I think that a good compromise here is that if you're in a relationship that gets defended in that way, you should just have to make it known at all times that what you're doing is legal. Like, just anytime you go out, you have to wear matching couples t-shirts that say, not a crime, and this is legal. Regardless of your opinions on this though, I think that we should all probably be able to agree that the issue with big age gaps isn't that there's a glass ceiling preventing older women from also being able to date someone who can't legally drink yet. But, you know, sure, whatever. So the show is a social experiment about destigmatizing female groomers, right? But it gets worse, because there's something I left out. Every woman there is the mother of one of the men there. And that changes it a lot, right? Like, very little of the show is actually about age gaps. The vast majority of it is instead about horrifying mother-son dynamics.
You're welcome. This is your dad.
Still give me love.
We're going in together. Bye, Joey.
I feel like this whole social experiment thing kind of got away from there a bit, eh? Anyways, the reason I bring all this up is because of something that happens in the second episode. They do a game where everyone writes down a secret and the mothers and sons have to guess the other's secret. If they're able to stump each other, then they win a date. So this isn't all important, but the fact that the goal of the game is to guess wrong makes it so fucking stupid. Like, first of all, just statistically, guessing wrong is the more likely outcome. If they just reached into a bag and pulled out an answer at random, they'd have an almost 88% chance of winning. Secondly, they're very specifically rewarding the team that doesn't know shit about each other. Like, it doesn't even make sense to the people on the show. One team guesses right, and then they start celebrating because they thought that they won, and then they people make fun of them for being dumb. No, guys, you misunderstood. The actual game is much worse and less fun than what you're doing. Anyways, aside from that, the game is kind of just fine and harmless until one of the MILFs named So Young, which, yes, I agree, that is an ironic name for a MILF. But anyway, So Young reveals that her secret was that she once slept with her son Jimmy's best friend.
There's no way.
Did you know that?
No!
It's very fucked up. For one thing, as soon as So Young reveals this, the mood changes dramatically, but Jimmy tries to play it off and keep the party going. I think because he doesn't want to think about it, and also he's still trying to flirt with the MILFs, even though they are all now just visibly sad for him. Although honestly, not to kick a guy while he's down, but wow, this definitely didn't help things. Jimmy's kind of a weird guy, and so he was already having some issues flirting with the MILFs.
Pola has these feet that I just want to oil up and lather and just massage and get real warm.
We can't be vanilla, bro. We got moms here. We gotta really step our game up.
No.
I love how he presents that as if he's trying to be accommodating, but clearly he just has a fetish for sucking on MILF toes, right?
Shove in my mouth and yeah.
And Godspeed, I support you, brother, but don't act like you're doing a selfless gesture here. Just own the fact that you're sucking those toes for you. So anyway, they finish the game and the winners go out on dates and everyone kind of moves on and forgets about it, except for Jimmy, whose relationship with his mother and presumably his best friend have been irrevocably damaged. And watching him go through it is kind of wild. He doesn't deal with things very well, which, I mean, what would you expect? And so he just spends the night alone hanging out in the pool, and when his mom tries to talk to him, he refuses to get out or even come towards her, and instead just starts shouting how she's not ready for how wild and real things are about to get. Now, obviously, this is completely fucked, and everyone involved in this show should stand trial for their crimes, but holy shit, that scene has stuck with me. The confused and sort of immature way that Jimmy deals with this while clearly trying to reconcile his conflicting feelings seems to me like such a real look into a vulnerable moment that I don't think I've ever seen on a Netflix reality show. And when I say that, we can actually test this with a Netflix show that I think is about as close to a one-to-one comparison as it's possible to get. Dated and Related.
You'll be joined by your brother or sister. Could your sibling be the answer to finding everlasting love?
Now, something that's extremely telling here, and also a massive relief, is that the trailer I just showed you is just an extremely transparent way for them to get eyes on the show by making it look a lot worse than it actually is. In reality, the show isn't at all what you think it is, and is honestly just really boring. Basically, all the contestants come on with a relative, usually their sibling, and then they both have to find someone to date and act as wingman or woman for the other. My favorite relatives on the show are these guys, Chris Hann and Jason Cohen. They're the only cousins on the show and are very dumb. Their whole thing though is that they're supposed to be the funny ones, which, I don't know.
To be like a pirate.
What's a pirate's favorite letter?
R.
You would think it's the R, but it's the C.
Funny as fuck.
Your humor is just insane.
Cheers to that. Keep hanging around with us.
Yeah.
Definitely get dimples.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Actually hilarious. It's literally hilarious. That's so funny. Or the way that the show works is that everyone has to sleep in these weird double beds with their relative. The idea is that it's meant to encourage them to work together since they can't sleep with someone unless their relative is also coupled up. When they see the beds, Chris and Jason say this.
I know my bed's gonna get a lot of action. Obviously not with him though. Sorry, not sorry.
And it's yeah, man, I don't know if you needed to clarify that. I didn't think that you were going to your cousin on TV. It's so nuts too, the way he says that as like a no homo type joke, except like being gay is the absolute least weird thing about that. The issue is not in sex, but a similar sounding word that would get this video demonetized if I said it. And this is the thing I've noticed on basically all Netflix reality shows. Like, things are still very messy. Every show has an obligatory villain or love triangle, and people get emotional, but at the same time, we never see things like a weird or embarrassing hobby. No one is ever really complicated or contradictory in the way that actual human beings are. I don't think I've ever even seen someone tell a real joke. And there's like definitely a few reasons for this, right? One of them is to allow them to reuse cast members, bring them from one show to another, although usually only if they're like really hot. Another reason, as Jack Saint pointed out in his videos about Netflix true crime shows, the way they tend to deal with controversial subjects is by having their cake and eating it too. Netflix loves to make shows with fucked up premises to generate outrage, but then if you actually watch them, the shows are all generally stale, formulaic slop with some watered down corporate woke sentiments thrown in for good measure. And so obviously, it makes way more sense to focus on hollow reality show archetypes rather than real moments. And look, I realize how this is probably coming off here. I'm not trying to advocate for more families being publicly torn apart for my amusement like a little boy king. But also, I think it's extremely fair to say that those kinds of voyeuristic moments are, for better or worse, the appeal of watching reality TV. And so, I'm interested in exploring what happens when they're edited out and sanitized. We also need to be very clear about the fact that not showing this stuff does not necessarily make these shows any more ethical. As we'll see, Netflix reality shows are voyeuristic to an extent that's honestly shocking.
He would stay up on his computer all night long. Like, I could hear him typing over there at 4 a.m.
Well, let's get into James at night. We're gonna take a look at some never-before-seen footage.
What are you about to do? I think that's perfect. I hope my grandma doesn't watch this.
Shower sex is usually difficult, but we have a big bench.
But I don't think my grandma knows what a sounding rod is.
So first of all, goals, but also, that's nuts, right? I mean, I guess it's on them for having kinky sex while on a reality show, but also, it is kind of nuts that the show just fully made a sex tape and aired it, right? Like, that feels like a pretty big violation of their privacy. Not to mention this guy's other orifices. And speaking of privacy, let me quickly tell you about this video's sponsor, Aura. I'm honestly pretty stoked to tell you about this one, since if you've seen any of my videos where I talk about the internet, you'll know that the right to privacy is something I take very seriously. Unfortunately for me, this is an extremely depressing thing to be passionate about, since if you just Google your name, it probably won't take you very long before you start seeing your personal information appearing. A big reason for this is data brokers, who collect your information and sell it out to just anyone who wants it. This could include spammers, scammers, and even like stalkers. That's where Aura comes in. So something these data brokers don't really want you to know is that if you request that they take down your information, they have to comply. And while I think that it's extremely messed up that you still actually have to go to the trouble of opting out of these things at all, Aura is able to take care of this hassle for you. They track down any data brokers that have your information and get it taken down. Unfortunately, one downside about this otherwise very good service is that it's not available in Canada where I live, and so I decided to hit up an American friend of mine and got him to try it out for me to let me know if it was good.
Hey, what's up, Sam? So, look, I tried Aura out, and whoa, dude, I was able to get my personal information taken down real quick, which has resulted in me getting a lot less spam and way more peace of mind. But I'm honestly kind of blown away at how much more Aura does. Like, it's a password manager, an antivirus, it changed my voice and makes me look all blurred out now. Like, this is not actually an effect you're seeing here. I actually do sound like this now. This is my life. It's also a VPN. Animals get scared whenever they see me, and my own mother doesn't even recognize me anymore. So yeah, Sam, Aura, really great. But when does all this wear off and I go back to normal?
It doesn't. So if you'd like to try Aura for yourself, just click the link in the description or go to aura.com/we'reinhell, all one word, no apostrophe, to get a 14-day free trial, so no pressure if you don't like it. See for yourself how much of your data is out there and if Aura is right for you, all while supporting this channel a little bit while you're at it. Now, back to the video.
Wait, no! You said you could reverse this! You said you could cure me!
Now, obviously, the reason Netflix shows are like this isn't at all altruistic, but because they make more money this way by appealing to the lowest common denominator. By the way, I'm gonna be pretty critical of these shows, and to some extent the people who watch them, myself included, but I want to make it clear that I don't think that watching stuff like this makes someone dumb. In a great essay by David Foster Wallace, which I'll be coming back to later, so get your bandanas ready for that, he makes a great point that the reason why things that appeal to a mass audience are so dumb isn't because the average person is dumb, but instead because generally people's highbrow interests are all different, but our lowbrow interests are all the same. Now, some people like literature, some people like philosophy, some people like science, but we all love watching shitty people causing drama. And so, let's get into the real focus of this video. Also, I realized that the cup should be gold. I didn't get it in time. Love is Blind premiered in 2018 and has quickly become one of the biggest reality shows that there is. It's won multiple Emmys and gotten spin-offs set in Argentina, Brazil, Germany, Japan, Sweden, the UK, and the United Arab Emirates. And most importantly for us, I think that in a lot of ways, the show exemplifies everything I've been talking about, except instead of all this hollowness being a weakness, I actually think that this hollowness is a key part of the show's success. I think you'll see what I mean soon, but first, for the uninitiated, let me explain what Love is Blind is all about. The way it works is that 15 men and 15 women are brought onto a set. The men are all kept on one side and the women on the other, and they spend most of the time there going on literal blind dates where they go into soundproof rooms that the show calls the pods and talk to each other through a wall. All this is presented as
a social experiment,
meant to test if it's possible to fall in love with someone without ever seeing them. This framing of the show as an experiment is really interesting because in most ways, the show is very willing to sort of seem open and be kind of meta. You know, they'll regularly break the fourth wall, you'll see the cast interacting with producers.
What are you thinking about? Are you rolling? Hang on. My bad. This is too much.
The cast will even talk about things like social media or how they've seen previous seasons.
You watch the show, you know, America, they do love a good underdog, and they do love comebacks.
I know that you are thinking about the lights and the camera and the action.
I feel like I broke somebody's heart on national TV.
I think I now got the entire country of America on my side.
But despite being at least seemingly transparent in all these ways, one thing that no one is ever allowed to challenge on the show is the idea that this is actually an experiment.
I want a man that will embrace the experiment.
This experiment.
This experiment.
This experiment.
This experiment.
This experiment.
This experiment. Up to this experiment.
This blind love experiment.
As a scientist, I expected to see holes in the experiment.
Nobody understands this experiment.
I love this experiment.
I kind of feel you kind of played the experiment in a way.
It's surprisingly sound.
I came into this experiment.
This experiment.
This experiment for me has changed my life. I will believe this experiment.
They told me she decided not to continue with the experiment.
I'm alive for a reason. I'm doing this experiment.
Yeah, for anyone curious about the results of the experiment, heads up, I'm about to spoil the entire show for you, but yes, it is possible to fall in love with someone without seeing them. Like, obviously. Like, long-distance relationships have existed throughout history where people have fallen in love purely through, like, writing letters. Also, literal blind people exist. This is a trivially obvious question, right? But the thing is, you have to remember that just like MILF Manor, Love is Blind is a social experiment, which of course means that I'm burying the lead here. The deranged twist, and the reason why this show is so popular, is that the people on it have 10 days in the pods to make a connection and fall in love. Then, if they want to keep seeing the person who they've met, they have to get engaged. The real and legally binding wedding is then 4 weeks later. That's what this show is actually about. None of this is actually remotely about an experiment to see if people can fall in love without seeing each other first. The show is watching people get married a month after they've met. I did the metal cup thing. I think I'm switching back to water now. It's a water bottle channel, fuck it, who am I trying to fool? The show's hosted by Nick and Vanessa Lachey, who start each season with a speech about how superficial dating is now. After that, the cast members all talk about why they're doing this completely deranged thing. Something that I find really funny is that a very common reason is that they're sick of being on the apps.
But tell us, what brought you here?
I feel like dating apps.
Dating apps and dating in general.
I've dated a lot on the dating apps, and it's exhausting.
When I meet men on dating apps, I think they see an Asian and they stereotype me.
Race is something you can't really hide on the dating apps.
Like, I get it, dating apps suck, but it's very funny to act like going on a reality TV show where you get married to someone you've known for a month is the next reasonable alternative instead of like joining a club. But the other thing that they tend to bring up is not wanting to be judged based on what they look like.
Just off my looks, everyone kind of thinks I'm a playboy, kind of.
A lot of people don't take me seriously because I ain't ugly.
This is still kind of weird though, because even though the whole premise of the show is that they fall in love without knowing what the other person looks like, they absolutely can tell a lot about what the other person looks like. For one thing, there are always people who will drop little hints.
I work in real estate.
Do you sell a lot? Because I feel like you have to be somewhat attractive.
I have a huge Instagram following. I teach Pilates, so I like to be active.
My biggest passion is probably fitness and nutrition.
I think they're just gonna like, talking to a ballet dancer.
The absolute craziest of these, though, is Shake from season 2, who really brings out the 4D chess when he's talking to the women on the show.
I love buying clothes for girls. Yeah, what's your size? Would you like working out?
Yeah, not a huge fan.
I get along best with individuals that do work out. How old are you?
33.
I prefer dating younger. At a music festival, do you like being on a guy's shoulders?
You're up for the challenge, you can pick me up.
Will I have trouble picking you up?
I like how with these questions, it honestly probably would have been much less insulting if you just straight up asked them if they were fat, rather than doing this thing where he shows that he also thinks that they are stupid. By the way, Shake is by far my favorite kind of reality show villain. Just the guy who thinks that he's being like a clever puppet master, and in reality, everyone just thinks he's an idiot and hates him.
Not winning any body contests over here, but it's not my strong suit.
No one cares.
It's also interesting how much Shake cares about these women's weights, considering that he is probably one of the least fit guys on the show. Which, like, when I say that, like, Shake is, like, just normal. It's just that most of the guys on the show are jacked. Which is itself kind of weird, right? Like, when I heard the premise of the show, my assumption was that, like, oh, I bet there'll be a bunch of people there who aren't very conventionally attractive, or maybe there'll be like fat people or disabled people, right? But no, not at all. Everyone on the show is able-bodied, and over 6 seasons there have been, I think, just 2 plus-size women. And like, strange, right? thank you so much for applying to Love is Blind, this show where appearance doesn't matter. However, BMI does, and yours is over 20, so get lost. But while the people on the show are very hot, in true Netflix reality show fashion, they are also excruciatingly normal. Like, I'm talking about the kind of people who think that it's crazy for a woman to like beer or sports.
What are you drinking right now?
A beer.
No way, you're a beer girl.
What's the weirdest thing about you?
I actually dig sports. At the bar, I'll walk by and I'll smack your ass and then I'll laugh about it.
Oh my god, yeah.
I'm just like raunchy and weird and like...
Okay, she is out of control. Now, as I've said, Love is Blind also still breaks people down into archetypes, which is nothing new for reality TV. A former producer of The Bachelor once said in an interview,
"We study the contestants ad nauseum before they arrive. You'd pre-categorize everyone and have some shorthand as to who they were. Mom, Southern Belle, the cheerleader, the bitch. We all called them by ridiculous names. The fat one, the hot one, the crier."
Cool, man. Sounds like a good place to work. Similarly, every Love is Blind season features the same reoccurring types. There's usually one really good couple. Another type that I don't think I've seen anywhere else on reality shows is that every season has one guy who won't stop talking about how logical he is.
We can rate them out of 10.
Oh, here we go, analytical shame.
Bartiz, he's charismatic. He just seems quite logical.
1 through 2 in years 5 through 8 are when couples are most likely to get divorced.
Based on the amount of data that I have, would accrue a tremendous amount of risk.
You literally made an Excel spreadsheet on your notebook.
The algorithm.
And then this one isn't in every season, but a lot of them will have what I'm gonna call the Reddit couple. Like, the guy is always the funny one among the men on the show, but it's always in a very epic sauce amazeballs kind of way.
My dad.
My dad.
You're making fun of me?
Yeah.
My dad. You just hit like every major category of awesomeness in my book.
And then this guy will like pretty much always fall for a woman who like makes a point of saying that she has way more male friends and doesn't really get along with other women.
I'm so used to like running with the boys. I'm just so crazy sometimes.
And then they come together and form the type of couple who would get matching Dick Smells Like Chapstick shirts.
It's just the craziest, what the fuck, but yeah!
Barnett drives me to the ends of its sanity and fucking love him.
Also remember that all of them are dating multiple people simultaneously and also spending all of their time with the other people who are dating the people that they're falling for. And again, the stakes here are that these people all expect to meet their true love and get married. This is probably the main secret behind the show's success, since what I just described is a pretty perfect recipe for insane relationships. But while the show is obviously trying to create drama, I think it's also interesting to examine what they seem to think an ideal relationship looks like. Throughout the show, they are very specific about the fact that the goal is to create
Emotional connection. Emotional connection. Emotional connection.
Our emotional connection.
The emotional connection.
That's
an emotional connection.
Emotional connection.
Our foundation was built off of that emotional connection.
What this means is that when they're dating in the pods, after covering the most basic small talk possible, they immediately switch to then talking about the heaviest things imaginable. Generally, this means a recent death of a loved one or else traumatic childhood experiences.
My dad passed away when I was 13 years old.
My dad was not very nurturing. He would say, you're gonna be on the side of the road begging for change and I'm not gonna stop to give you any.
A year ago, almost lost my life.
And my mom at the time had brain tumors. They were very aggressive. They didn't respond to chemo or radiation.
I was ready to go to bed and she pressured herself on me.
She passed when I was 18.
I never saw the knife in his hand.
Or sometimes they're like things that to me seem completely fine and normal that are just brought up as if they're absolute deal breakers.
I actually was an egg donor.
I just want to be as transparent as possible. On the weekends, I do some service industry things.
I don't see that as an issue. I think that's beautiful.
Then let's talk about the opposite of that. As much as they go on about the benefits of
A strong emotional connection.
They also paint essentially anything other than their process as
superficial.
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 An example of this that really stood out to me was when Natalie, one of the cast members from season 2, says this about how being on the show has changed what she looks for in a partner.
With the guy who wore jean shorts, and I just assumed that it wouldn't go well. Such a silly thing to say. It's not gonna help me find the love of my life.
Just imagine that guy sees this and like bursts into tears and burns his jorts. So yeah, I don't know, like, I don't really think that she needs to feel bad about that. You know, like, hey, maybe that is a bit harsh, but also like, if she got the ick, she got the ick, and like, whatever, right? But also, how someone dresses does actually tell you a lot about them. In fact, there are a lot of things that you can learn about a person from seeing them. All things that the show seems to see as completely superficial. One example is, body language, facial expressions, and tone that don't come through if you're just talking to a glowing blue wall. This is actually something that comes up pretty regularly on the show.
In real life, she's different.
Mannerism.
Exactly.
Going out from talking at a wall and then talking in person is like completely different.
Also, I just want to point out something about that last guy I showed, JP, from season 5. So, a thing with him is that literally every outfit that he wears on the show either has an American flag on it or is red, white, and blue. This is honestly a great example of how important seeing how someone dresses can be. Like, I think that maybe if Taylor had been able to see those outfits before getting engaged to him, it might not have been such a surprise when he turned out to be a psycho.
Caked up face, fake eyelashes.
You didn't know what I looked like before.
You presented fake. How is me saying that I like you better without makeup so bad? 99% of women would love to hear that.
Like, just think about this. The premise of the show hid the fact that this guy is a literal walking red flag. Also, maybe this is a hot take here, but contrary to the concept of the show, while obviously looks aren't everything, I actually don't think that it's vain to want to be attracted to the person that you marry. That is completely normal and fine. That's not all though. Like I said, the conversations in the pods focus on things like how close people are with their families, what kind of parent they want to be, and maybe career goals, but they never touch on a lot of things that I think are actually really important. For instance, what about seeing how a person acts in social situations? It seems like pretty key to me. Or what about how only in the newest season that just aired do we finally see someone ask what the person they're talking to's politics are?
Where do you stand on politics?
I'm more conservative.
Okay.
I'm a huge patriot, but I will say that I have a lot of friends that are,
One of the craziest forms this takes is in season 2, when this couple, Kyle and Shayna, are fully about to get engaged, when they have one of the weirdest conversations I've seen on this show. So it starts with Shayna saying how smart she thinks Kyle is.
You're very intelligent.
Thanks. Sorry.
And then she asks him if he went to college, and when he says
no.
I love that. I didn't go to college either.
Really?
No.
Which, no shade to anyone who never had a post-secondary education, but when someone says that they think that not going to college actually means that you're way smarter, I feel like that's a pretty sure sign that they're gonna say something really stupid or crazy soon. And sure enough, the next thing they talk about is religion, when Shayna brings up how she's extremely religious and Kyle says that he's an atheist, and it doesn't go well.
Would you go to church with me on Sundays? Faith is definitely important to me.
I'm not religious at all.
This is naturally a huge problem for Shayna, whereas I think Kyle is a lot less bothered than he probably should be.
And you say, let's say grace.
Yes.
I'll try and fart or burp and say, who's Grace?
No.
I am resistant to brainwashing.
I think you are brainwashed. You think we're accidentally here.
It's not an accident. So you don't believe in evolution?
I do not believe in evolution at all.
Stop it.
Okay, so I'm saying this as someone who would call himself an agnostic, in that I'm basically an atheist who also thinks that transcendental philosophy is cool. Also though, if anyone asks me what I believe, my favorite answer to piss off like the most annoying types of atheists and religious people is to just say that I don't care. Like, just try it sometime. They get very mad. Just be like, yeah, I just don't think about it. You know, it's cool that you do. I'm just more into magic cards. Yeah, this is all to say that, like, I have plenty of religious friends who I love and respect. You know, I don't think that disagreeing on this needs to be a deal breaker necessarily, but like, my dude, this woman is saying that she wouldn't let your kids learn about evolution. This is not a minor issue.
You're asking me if I'm okay with you instilling the religion into our children?
Yeah.
That's fine.
But they actually decide to do the healthy thing here and just get engaged without talking about it. And then when they meet, Kyle sees what Shayna looks like for the first time, and suddenly he seems a lot more open about Christianity. No idea why.
I'm so physically attracted to her. It's crazy.
It's pretty brutal. From then on, Kyle's just like, yeah, you can convert me. I'm down.
Are you pissed that you're with a Christian?
You're gonna teach me.
Oh.
I am all ears.
Or even, like, Kyle's a vegetarian, but on his first night with Shayna, he, like, asks to eat some of her steak.
Wait, when's the last time you actually
Steak
ate?
ears.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't realize it was possible to look that soy while eating meat. Shockingly, Kyle's plan to woo Shayna by showing that he's willing to abandon any of his principles at the drop of a hat doesn't work, and Shayna winds up dumping him.
I'm sorry.
I never thought this day and age that's the deal breaker.
By no means the worst breakup on the show. It seemed to me like they were just in a shitty situation. They both could have treated each other a lot better, but I don't think either of them is like really obviously in the wrong. And then it gets so messy so fast. So after leaving Kyle because he's not a godly man.
Are you a godly man?
I don't know what that is.
Shayna decides to try to rekindle her relationship with Shane, the guy who dumped her for Natalie though, and I don't know, I'm no expert, but I feel like trying to break up someone's engagement isn't something Christians are generally supposed to do.
What are you wearing? What cologne? Why are you smiling? I'm shy.
You are so far from shy.
No.
Yesterday, Shayna called me and she was like, I have someone to hook you up with if things don't work out.
What's pissing you off?
Trying to find Natalie a boyfriend?
Where'd you hear this from? No, I want to know who told
Natalie.
you. It was completely taken out of context. I would talk to Natalie and call her out because
I don't want anyone to call anyone out.
I don't understand. I don't know if you guys are bored in your relationship, that you guys had to like throw me in there.
I think that there's a rule about that. Also, Shane has an OnlyFans now, and you know, I don't know, maybe he is also a hardcore creationist too, but that kind of seems to me like he might not be the most godly man either. You know, the lesson I take from all this is really just, we're all the same, man. You know, Christian, atheist, we're all willing to set aside our most deeply held beliefs in order to get a chance with someone hot. That's what this show's about, right? Also, just want to talk about Shane real quick because this guy is very funny.
Could we get an old-fashioned kind of like fountain just keeps pouring out old-fashioned mix?
What?
Cheese curds?
Okay.
Is that okay? Hot dogs, pizza, mac and cheese, cheese curds. I think that would be like...
Shane, my entire family's lactose intolerant.
So insanely chaotic. Upstairs neighbor thinks that they can get away with being noisy just because they have a newborn, you know? The fuck? Like vacuuming and like moving furniture at 9 a.m. when I'm trying to get to sleep, but suddenly I'm the asshole because I'm recording all night. Yeah, sure, makes sense. There's also sort of like a running joke, like theory on the internet that he's on coke because he's very intense and also makes faces like this all the time.
I live off of adrenaline. We need to sit down and like look at our finances though, because I don't do that at all, really. We're at a restaurant. Let's go to the bathroom and let's fuck around. Like,
how much?
Oh my god, over like probably $2,000 like
a month.
I just like want to run through a wall. I feed off of energy and I'm like, my heart's like pounding out of my chest right now.
Okay, Shane, we like can't do that anymore. We need to be like really...
I like this too because his fiance Natalie would always just say how he has such a good heart, and it's like, No, very much the opposite. His heart is holding on by a thread. Now, in all seriousness, I don't want to be too mean to the people on these shows. You know, I'm just joking around here. I don't know Shane's life. If he does have a drug problem, I hope he gets the help he needs. And if he doesn't, then I hope he never gets his hands on coke, because he would really like it. But what I find interesting in all of this is that, in a way, the stated premise of the show and the weird social experiment twist actually aren't as separate as they initially seem. The blindness that they're talking about isn't so much a matter of the people on the show not knowing what each other looks like, but that they're getting married knowing the absolute bare minimum about each other. It's actually made explicit in the season 2 cast reunion. So, some background here. Shake, the guy I mentioned earlier who was asking women in the pods what they weighed, is probably that season's main villain. Not just because of the weight stuff, but also he winds up getting engaged to Deepti, and apparently he has some hang-ups about dating Indian women because they remind him too much of his family.
I don't know. In the pods, we had an amazing connection, but it's a purely emotional one. My serious relationships, they've all been blonde. It feels like I'm with my aunt or something.
So pretty weird issue, right? But whatever, like that alone doesn't make him a villain. The thing is that because of this, he has a really hard time finding Deepti attractive. Now, honestly, I think that he sincerely wanted to get over this. The problem is that he tried to do that by very openly telling everyone he could that he wasn't attracted to her.
So what's the problem? Physical attraction. I'm not physically attracted to her. I feel like I'm with like a family member. She reminds me so much of my aunt. I'm just not feeling necessarily the kind of like overwhelming instinctual attraction or animalistic attraction.
Normally it's TMI.
Yeah, TMI is a bit of an understatement there. But yeah, so we didn't really see this on the show, but in the reunion, we learned that everyone told her what he was saying because they're her friends and people talk, and so she just reads him to filth.
Just want to say it's okay to not be physically attracted to somebody. It's how you do it and how you say it that's extremely disrespectful. It's degrading to women. To sit there and watch you say these disgusting fucking things about me is so degrading. The fact that I ever respected you as a person, I'm mind blown.
Also, when they brought up how he asked women what they weighed, he said this.
It's not that different than making a huge purchase.
Very wild thing to say. Just like, how could people say I didn't value her? I literally see her as an expensive object. So that line was obviously what got the most attention, but there's something that he says earlier on that I found really fascinating. So at one point, Shane says that the point of the show is to find a wife, and Shake interrupts to say that he doesn't think that that's true, and that
this show is about finding love, okay? It's not about rushing into something.
And just look at everyone's reaction here. Shake goes on to say that it shouldn't be about rushing through everything and just getting married for the sake of getting married. And everyone just shuts him down immediately.
Shake, that's the point of the show.
Yeah, that's
I know.
actually not what the show is.
Did you read the description before going on?
You don't know what it is?
I'm sure part of that reaction is just because they all, pretty understandably hate his guts, but it's crazy that they're all just like, no, you idiot. The point is to rush into a marriage with someone you barely know, something that we all think is good to do. This becomes extremely clear when the cast members leave the pods and go on to have what I think can best be described as a demented speed run of the regular course of a relationship. The first thing this involves is sending the couples on a vacation that serves as a sort of pre-honeymoon where they all go to a tropical resort. And when I say that, I mean that they all go to the same resort where the only people that they can spend time with are, their fiance, obviously, and then just all the other couples from the show, many of whom they have dated before. One of the things that's so messed up about this is how they frame all of them having to spend time together as an important way to test their relationship, as if this is a normal situation for married couples to find themselves in.
It's so weird putting your voice to your face. It's so weird. How's everything going now, though? Good?
Good.
Okay, that's enough. I have to go stop it.
Yeah, if your marriage is going to work, you have to see how you and your partner deal with being at a party made up entirely of your exes, all of whom are now engaged to one of your former roommates. Oh, and no one is over each other because you all ended things like 2 days before getting engaged to your current partner. Also, it's open bar. We've all been there, right, folks? Something kind of interesting is how this part of the show has evolved over the seasons. When they all meet up in the first season, Nick and Vanessa are there and sort of just present them all seeing each other for the first time as like a fun, neat little thing.
Ladies, I know you recognize the other ladies here. Gentlemen, I know you recognize the other gentlemen here. To love and happiness, and to all of you. Have fun, you guys. So happy for you.
This changes in the second and third seasons though, where they're a lot more open about how the reason why they're all being made to hang out is to cause drama.
Ladies, I would like you to meet the gentleman who you dated but did not propose to in the pods.
I feel like it's gotta be so weird pairing the face to the voice. Soon we'll see how the realities of the material world, your looks, your age, maybe even seeing someone here who you didn't choose.
People who you didn't choose.
Will any of those things change the way you feel about one another?
And I don't know, maybe there is something to be said about how rather than hiding or trying to justify it, the show is just being open about this scummy thing that they're doing. But these scenes really don't sit well with me, because like the issue is that this show, Social Experiment, actually has very real consequences for the lives of the people on it. Like, while they do all sorts of manipulations and dishonest editing, remember that the weddings at the end are completely real and legally binding. And so it feels weird watching the hosts clearly enjoying how juicy all the drama is when we know that very soon said drama will almost certainly be a contributing factor to multiple real divorces. Imagine if someone actually did something like this to you in real life. Like you, your partner, and a bunch of your friends are all gonna go on a big group vacation, but then someone decides that specifically in order to mess with your relationship, that they're going to invite your ex. And not just an ex, the ex. Like the one that you just thought of right now. Then the person who brought them is just walking around like, ooh, interesting. I wonder how this will affect their relationship. I feel like that's straight up blood feud territory, right? Like, our children's children are going to war after this. And so, like, my theory is that having the two hosts telling the cast to their faces what they had done might have come off as a bit too villainous, and so from season 4 on, rather than having them go to the resort, Nick and Vanessa instead make light of the twisted game that they're playing from the undeserved safety of a studio.
Their love will be put to the test. Their love is about to face some serious tests.
And with their weddings only 4 weeks away, their love is about to face some serious tests.
With their weddings just 4 weeks away, their weddings are just 4 weeks away.
Is love truly enough to conquer it all? Will love be enough? Is love blind?
I know, or I could just be overthinking a very small detail of a stupid show. No, that's impossible. So yeah, the resort is an absolute nightmare for all the reasons I just listed, as well as the fact that there are people who are just not attracted to their partner. This happens in every season, but we probably see the most of it in season 3. First of all, there's Bartise, who spent his time in the pods talking to 2 women, Nancy and Raven. It was a pretty hard situation for him, to be perfectly honest. Like, on the one hand, there was Nancy, who seems like this unbelievably sweet person who he had a ton of chemistry with.
We're giggly, we're having fun, we always get each other's jokes. Okay, Miss Selena, hey, over here. What do you think about that crazy fan Bartise?
Unfortunately, we had to call security on him.
We can talk about anything for any amount of time.
And on the other hand, there's Raven, who seems really like cool and nice, but who Bartise is mainly interested in because she teaches Pilates, and so he figured that she was really hot.
We have the same common interests with fitness and a healthy lifestyle. Raven, as you know, probably is probably a very attractive girl.
Raven winds up developing feelings for someone else, and so she dumps Bartise, who winds up with Nancy. One thing that's interesting about Nancy and Bartise's relationship is that Nancy is 6 years older than him, which isn't the biggest deal ever, but also Bartise likes to say stuff like this.
I'm a young buck. Fucking talking about getting pumped full of kids from a fucking kid.
Yeah, that just makes me feel like he's not on the show for the right reasons, you know? Like, he should be on MILF Manor sucking toes. Or else, you know, in jail. And then when they're all at the resort, Bartise just very shamelessly starts thirsting after Raven, despite her not being at all into him.
So I was like, okay, yeah, she probably a baddie. And then I saw you walk down, that's kind of like, damn, yeah, fuck, she's a good looking girl. No, I had to bring it up, give you a compliment, but no.
Thank you.
I feel like on paper, we look like this freaking perfect match. Me and you had a connection where it was like, we're so similar.
Honestly, we are so emotionally incompatible. I don't know what we would say in real life.
It'll work out together?
Yeah, like what else would there even be?
Interestingly, Bartise is actually very open with Nancy about this to an extent that I would say borders on sociopathy.
She came down, she wearing the tight clothes. I was like, okay, she's a fucking smoke show. They see Raven, they see me, they say, okay, that's the person I want to go talk to because they look good. I'm literally having feelings for multiple women right now.
Cool, man, that's really interesting. Have you considered shutting the fuck up, though? So insane, just openly telling your partner how much more attracted to someone else you are. Bartise's behavior also just seems so much worse, too, when it's compared to Raven and SK, the guy that she actually wound up with, who seem, on the show at least, to have one of the few relationships that is actually, like, remotely healthy and mature. It's honestly, like, one of the sweeter things to see, just because, like, things are really awkward between them at first. SK's Nigerian, so I think, like, part of it's a culture divide. And then instead of just blowing up or like hating each other, they just actually communicate like adults and then grow to have a strong connection after that. Whereas Bartise is just continuously treating Nancy like shit.
He would give, 10 forehead kisses in a day. And now today when I said, hey, can I have a hug? And he said, you're so needy. I was like, okay, but like you haven't hugged me since yesterday.
The physical attraction is just not really there for me anymore.
This is like honestly kind of impressive. Because of Bartise, I actually feel bad for a landlord.
It is a short-term rental. It is one of 5 properties.
Also, something about Raven is that while she's at the resort, the camera guy who filmed her is criminally horny. Like, no one else gets filmed like this. Also, like, there are so many close-ups of just her feet. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Another villain in this season is Cole, who gets engaged to Zeneb. The two of them spend the whole season just sort of being casually shitty to each other.
Zay, what are we fighting about in this moment? Zay said, oh, we had such a great night. I said, it was so good.
It was good.
And here we are.
I'm excited you're finally cooking for me. You said you were going to for so long. What are you doing to this chicken? This was meant to be you cooking for me. Thanks for cooking, babe.
Let me know if you like these.
Let you know? Mm-hmm. They're good.
My personal read is that these are two people who really bring out the worst in each other and just should not be in a relationship. But also, Cole is like much worse. Also, something I just want to point out about this, I'm a pretty good cook, and so I tend to do most of the cooking for me and my girlfriend, but when she makes something, I do have the same bad habit of hovering and giving notes and stuff. And the thing is, if you're gonna backseat cook, you don't get to also criticize the food. You have to do one or the other. I mean, ideally don't do either, but I'm just saying that if you're giving someone instructions in the kitchen and then they fuck up, I think that's on you. See, I think Zeneb kind of has a short temper and can be a bit mean. Cole, on the other hand,
just be sweet, just be unassuming.
Be unassuming.
Are you bipolar?
We're having a very serious conversation.
What did I ask you just now? I asked you a question.
You asked if I was bipolar.
Oh, are you bipolar?
Or for instance, at the resort, Cole just openly shit talks Zeneb to everyone there.
Lots of sex. But there's moments in our day where we're just not.
It doesn't feel perfect.
And then when she comes to join them,
I haven't been talking about you at all. We've been talking about sports and stuff.
Cool, man. Also, just like Bartise, Cole realizes that he's extremely into another girl there named Colleen, pretty much purely because she's hot, and so he starts very openly flirting with her.
I knew that I would be physically attracted to you, but I was like...
It is very interesting.
I know, it's weird.
And bear in mind that he's doing this not just in front of his fiance, but also her fiance, so causing fights for another couple too. And worst of all, the way that he does this flirting is just straight up Michael Scott shit.
I don't know where my fiance went. Just kind of here. Knock. So.
What I'm trying to say here is that we here at We're in Hell are fine with cheating, but only if it's done by someone cool.
That's not the ring you wanted. Wanted cool. You know how I know? Because I asked.
See, no problem. Just come out as pro-cheating. Not polyamory or anything. Like, I'm specifically in favor of unethical non-monogamy. Hey, what's up? I have a haircut. What do you think? Does it look good? Leave a comment telling me that it looks good. I need a win right now, please. So you know what? I'm gonna redecorate a little bit here. Let's go nuts. Yeah. Put my friend's art up in the background. Yeah, thought I'd make the place look nice for once. How's that for an idea, huh? Also, buy my friend's art. Link in the description. I think that this print is called Disappearing Clouds, I think. Nope, Disintegrating Clouds. No, it doesn't matter. Go buy this piece. We're gonna sell so many copies of this that she'll have to change the name to just Sam. Cole also does the same thing as Bartiz, where he's very open with his fiance that he's more attracted to someone else.
I was like, you're a 9 out of 10. You were like, is there anyone here who you think is a 10 out of 10? I was just like, maybe one person.
No, you said 2 people, Raven and Colleen.
Something I just want to touch on here is that when she's obviously extremely upset with him for saying that, he responds by saying how he's just being real.
I would it's not even me. Like, I'd just love for you to be like more on just like one person and that's it.
What do you mean to say? No, I don't have eyeballs. No, I don't see anyone else with a nice body and a cute. Do you want me to do that? You want me to say, oh no, you're the only girl I see?
This is a thing you see all the time on reality shows and it drives me fucking crazy. Like, being honest is not the same thing as just saying the first thing that comes to mind, no matter how hurtful it is. Also, Cole does lie to her, and he looks like a youth pastor who buys weed off of his students. Not relevant to what I'm talking about, but it had to be said. From here, the couples all move into a condo together. Again, they are all living in the same building and mostly just have to hang out with each other. At this point, they spend the next 3 weeks getting to know one another in some pretty brutally basic ways. These include things like seeing where the person that they're about to marry actually lives. There's a few really funny instances of this. For example, Kwame from season 4, who has the most single guy apartment I've ever seen.
Welcome to my fortress of solitude.
Got some lotion right here.
The absolute weirdest instance of this, though, is Danielle's apartment from season 2, which makes her seem absolutely insufferable.
Thank you for this.
So what's your use case for using, like, hi, thanks for coming, and you're in a hot dog or corn costume?
Same reason I have games. I have the Nerf gun, I have lasers.
You're the Nerf.
So first of all, I don't love the reliance on prop comedy here. Like, if the only way you can think of to make board game night fun is by wearing a hot dog costume, I think that's a sign that you need to look inward.
When I have people who like to play the air guitar.
On the bright side, though, she also has a full set of rock band instruments, which she tells her fiance Nick absolutely have to be kept in the living room. That is non-negotiable.
Rock band stuff's gotta have some place to go.
I kind of like mine just out.
Can we like put it in that bin?
A drum set?
I love how she says that as if it's an actual instrument and not a video game controller. But then Danielle explains why the leg on her dining room table is broken.
And I made a sign that says no dancing on tables.
Like no one would climb on my kitchen table and break it.
Well, me and my friends do.
It's very funny seeing Nick trying to find the nicest possible way to explain to her that no, he and his friends actually don't get hyper and destroy his furniture because he's 35 years old. Yeah, Danielle and her friends sound absolutely fucked. And like, in the show, she very much got portrayed as the, like, unstable, toxic, crazy girl. And I want to be very clear here that I don't think that she and her friends are unstable or anything like that. Because just, like, look at how she lives. This woman has a gumball machine in her apartment and wears a hot dog costume around just because it's random. She's not crazy, she's terminally millennial. Just imagining her hanging out with her friends, just like, guys, look, I'm an airplane! Okay, so along with that, the couples will also meet each other's friends and families. Something that makes this part particularly weird is that a lot of the people on the show didn't tell anyone that they were doing this, which leads to the parents having to walk into what I imagine is probably one of the most confusing and terrifying experiences possible.
What is this place?
My new apartment. You moved.
Great start. Just, hey mom and dad, make yourselves comfortable in my extremely fancy and sterile new apartment that looks like the set for an ad for air fresheners. Let's see how she sticks the landing.
Okay. So, you know how obviously I was like single?
Oh man.
I signed up for this experiment, so I'm engaged. Oh my God. His name's Shane.
Amazing stuff. Fuck, I think I actually fucked up this chair. Also remember that they only get 3 weeks to plan their wedding. And so in a bunch of these, the cast members will tell their family that they're marrying this person who is essentially a stranger and then just be like, so yeah, wedding's in 2 weeks, would love it if you could come.
So you're planning a wedding?
Yes.
When?
Like in 2 weeks.
But even in more ideal situations, almost everyone winds up having to have some version of this conversation with their families, and they all come off sounding so insane.
We both got to engage in this social love experiment.
Basically, we live like in a townhouse, like together.
We do not see one another.
And we'll live there and like until like the wedding day. Oh.
And we have this connection beyond the physical.
Speaking of the wedding, you guys want to come? It's in a couple weeks.
My favorite instance of this is in season 4 when Bliss introduces her fiancé Zach to her father. Bliss's dad isn't at all on board, and so Zach tries to clear things up.
We both recognize what we're doing is crazy. What you might not know is, like, in the pods.
Bliss interjects to explain what a pod is, and then her dad says this.
Do you know what we mean when we say the pods? I don't think
I know what a pod is.
I need to know what this man thinks they mean when they say pods. Like, there's no way that this is what he's picturing, right? It's funny too, because we're generally meant to see the families who disapprove of the relationships as being wrong or somehow unreasonable, even though, no, they are completely correct. The families who immediately accept things are so much weirder.
Sex life is important. No,
it's not important, it's a necessity.
Is important.
I get good vibes from Paul, probably because he's Paul.
Is he a hickey there?
It's definitely a hickey.
I mean, I don't know him. You know, he could be a serial killer for all I know.
One great exception to this, though, is when Bartise meets Nancy's family. Her brothers take him outside to talk to him, and it's rough.
I need to know a little bit more about you, you know.
I'm on my second career now. Right now, I'm in financial due diligence.
Yeah, man, I feel like they were hoping to get a bit more out of you than just learning that you have a job that's so boring that it literally sounds fake. And then they ask him why he's with their sister, and his response is basically just that she's nice to him.
What is it that really makes you think she's the one?
I can feel that I will be happy for a long time, hopefully forever. So it's as simple as that.
And they're just like, yeah, she's a really nice person. That's all you got? The English language's blandest possible compliment?
It's a little bland to me. She's just so open and friendly. Like, she brings the best out of everyone.
And look, I'm not sure how I'd respond if I were in that situation. Like, I've had that happen once where the girl I was seeing's older brothers tried to vet me, and it was extremely uncomfortable. Here's how Bartise responded, though.
I'm emotionally unavailable. In the real world, I never told a girl I care about them.
No, you see, it's not like that with everyone because I'm a sociopath. I feel like the only way this could get worse is if he followed that up by saying how he'd leave her if she got fat.
If you were to gain 400 pounds, would you still love her? 400
pounds? I take care of my body, and I hope that my future wife takes care of her body.
You mean my sister?
But speaking of the ways that people respond to their loved ones being on the show, let's come back to Bliss's dad for a second and the reason why he doesn't approve of their relationship. After they drop the subject of whatever he thinks pods are, he talks about how people, particularly his daughter and by extension the show itself, don't respect marriage anymore.
People take marriage lightly. We all know that nowadays.
I'm not going to get married just to get married.
That's what you're doing.
And this is kind of interesting because in a very real sense, he is right. Most of the couples from the show either don't wind up going through with it or else very often get divorced pretty soon afterwards. But also, as Danielle J. Linderman points out in her book, True Story, What Reality TV Says About Us, The thing that's weird about Love is Blind is how, in a lot of ways, it is actually extremely traditional. At one point in season 2, Deepti introduces Sheikh to her Indian parents, who actually aren't that bothered by the way they're doing things, saying that
she was always against arranged marriage, but Love is Blind is kind of arranged.
Also, coming back to Kyle and Shayna, when they break up, Kyle says how he was surprised that him being an atheist was such a problem in present year.
I never thought this day and age that that's the deal breaker.
And maybe I'm just in a bubble here, but honestly, yeah, that does seem kind of odd to me, but it makes a bit more sense when you realize that the producers of Love is Blind have said that one of the places that they would go to recruit people to be on the show was churches. And if you look into the people who go on the show, most of them are quite religious. This is kind of the strange contradiction that you see a lot in the reality show genre, where the hook of this show that gets people to watch it is the fact that they are, in a sense, very much disrespecting the institution of marriage by using it as a source of drama. But on the other hand, I don't think that many people who watch this show would come away from it thinking that marriage is bad. I'd argue instead that it very much serves as pro-marriage propaganda. And speaking of which, let's talk about the weddings. The main characteristic of them is that, with a couple exceptions, they are all basically identical. There are a few examples where it gets personalized a bit. For instance, Sheikh and Deepti have an Indian wedding. Well, almost.
No, I cannot marry you.
Raven and SK also incorporate a bunch of Nigerian traditions. Well, almost.
I do not.
Also, in season 2, Jarrett's dad is a minister, and so he asks him and his fiancée Liana to let him be the one to officiate it, which is honestly really sweet. One thing that's kind of funny, though, is that after they say yes, he tells them this.
I've had people ask me to do their weddings because I believe the first one has to be for you.
And when I saw that, my first thought was just how funny it'd be if that actually made them change their minds. Just like, ooh, we were actually looking for someone with a bit more experience? But yeah, it makes sense that the weddings are all basically identical since they all had to be planned in just 3 weeks, in addition to everything else that they do for the show, all on top of still having to go to work, which, yeah, after the vacation ends, these people have to go back to their day jobs. This might also be a good time to mention that they have to pay for the weddings and rings out of their own pockets. But the funniest thing about the weddings is for sure how every single time the person performing the ceremony has to give the exact same speech.
In this blind love experiment, you chose to get engaged and
spend the rest of your lives together
based on an incredible emotional connection.
Sight unseen.
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 Now is the time to decide if love is blind.
And finally, as you saw, people say no. This is thankfully pretty common and can happen for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes they just realize that even though they were in love, the whole thing is fucking insane. In the case of Raven and SK, they actually fully kept dating afterwards, moving at a more normal pace. Other times, it's very messy. By far the funniest one was Nancy and Bartise, though. Bartise says no, and then they leave to talk, but just directly outside of the venue. After a few minutes of watching them fight, just through the windows, Nancy's family all come out and her brothers almost fight Bartise.
We will talk. I'm trying to give her a reason why I told.
This rule's so hard. Now, let's move on from Love is Blind, and to do that, I want to pull back the curtain a little bit, because despite what you may have come to believe, Nick and Vanessa actually aren't the real scientific minds behind this
experiment.
No, that honor instead belongs to this man, Chris Colin. So, let's talk about Colin for a little bit here, because he is kind of nuts. Colin originally wanted to be a journalist and interned at Fox Entertainment News during college. He was able to turn this into a proper gig in 1990 by harassing Kelsey Grammer while he was on trial for drug possession. As Colin describes it,
I did this stakeout at the courthouse when Kelsey Grammer got in trouble for drug charges. I got this interview as he was walking into the courthouse because I was either more aggressive or faster than everyone else. I walked into the courtroom, I sat down behind him and I said, Mr. Grammer, I feel so bad for asking you those questions. I just felt terrible, but they offered me a job in the news division after that.
Really goes to show that anyone can succeed as long as they're willing to work hard, show some initiative, and be a complete and utter scumbag. But shortly after this, in what amounted to a major win for humanity but a setback for Colin, the show that he was working on got cancelled, and so he wound up pivoting to working as an agent. He became pretty successful with a bunch of major clients, but he eventually found that the people that he preferred to represent were news and reality show hosts.
I did that for 5 years and I discovered that I didn't like representing actors at all. It was not fun.
From there, Colin's gone on to spend the rest of his career working in reality TV, where he's become kind of a major figure. He eventually became a producer and then founded his own production company, cont'd, in 2010. Starting out, cont'd's content was all pretty standard trashy reality shows, a lot of which are just American adaptations of European shows, which isn't particularly uncommon. We're talking about shows like Little Women LA, which is basically the same as any of the trash shows I've talked about so far, except the cast is made up mostly of little people.
Lila used to be Joe's hoe, and now Christy's bringing this hoe to the party? Bring at me. No.
Or there's Betty White's Off Their Rockers, which is basically just Punk'd, except rather than elaborate pranks being pulled on celebrities, this one old lady just does obviously scripted bits to random people on the street.
My husband just died. All he cared about was good-looking women. If a hot girl like you would dump these, I could have some closure. What you got there? The world's best grandma, Mike.
My grandchildren gave me the best grandma. There's only one world's best grandma.
And that's me.
But during those early years, they also did an American adaptation of Married at First Sight. And I think that this sparked something in Colin, who, after getting a taste for blood in the form of televised marriages, began making more and more shows in this vein. First was the American adaptation of the Australian show Kiss Bang Love, where people are set up by friends and ex-lovers. The couples are introduced with a blindfolded kiss and then spend a romantic weekend together. This was followed the next year by Spouse House, a show where a bunch of people all have to live in a house together and find someone to marry there. It's not good.
You're the only guy in the house that I've kissed.
You kissed me?
What the?
Or have I kissed you?
Oh my God, what? I kind of think you're a
He's in an exploratory marriage with Missy. And on the other hand, he's flirting with Brienne. The point of being in this house is not to have fun, it's to get married.
I do want to go into the exploratory marriage as well.
We're talking about marriage here. The pushing towards it is a huge
One thing that can be said about these shows, though, is that in them, you can see all the elements that would take shape and form Love is Blind in 2020. After it took off and became an immediate hit, Colin has now gone on to make multiple spin-offs for Netflix, the most notable being The Ultimatum. That's right, fuckers. Did you think I forgot about The Ultimatum? Nope. I just didn't want to talk about it as much because watching it makes me sad. Let's fucking go. So, as fucked up as Love is Blind can be, The Ultimatum is genuinely evil. The idea is that the people who go on it are in established relationships where one person wants to get married but the other isn't ready yet. One of the weird things with this is that the most common reason for this is finances, which I think that that's actually pretty reasonable, especially since so many of these couples are really young. Also, most of them have not been together for very long at all. They'll act like it's completely unreasonable for someone to not be ready to get married even though they've only been together for 1 or 2 years. Where the ultimatum comes in here is that if the couples don't get married in the end, then they break up. This is, in my opinion, a pretty manipulative thing to do in general, particularly if you're doing it by going on this show. Like, it's one thing with Love is Blind where people are going in single and trying to start a relationship, but imagine coming home one day and your partner's just like, hey, I know we've been having problems lately, but I decided to make them so much worse by signing us up to be part of a sort of modern day human zoo. Something really funny though is that in the first episode of both seasons, Nick says this.
Psychologists agree an ultimatum is not a good way to get someone to do what you want, but it is the best way to get you the answers you need on a timetable you can live with.
I like that.
Yeah, I feel like he probably wasn't quoting psychologists for the second half of that line, eh? So the premise of this is apparently modeled directly after Nick and Vanessa's relationship. Vanessa explains that she gave Nick an ultimatum.
I always said I was gonna be that girl that would never give a man an ultimatum, and I was 29. We dated for 5 years. So I finally said, what are we doing?
And so then
we took a break. We both saw one other person. We realized if we got out of our own way, we could be amazing together.
Oh wow, okay, that's kind of a weird thing to do. Wait, you aren't gonna make all of them break up and...
So tonight is your last night together as a couple.
At the end of the week, you'll each choose a new partner.
Jesus Christ. So yeah, that's the show. They all have to break up and form relationships with someone new. And if you thought the way people flirted on Love is Blind was creepy, you ain't seen shit yet. We get all the same weirdness with people going from small talk directly into extremely deep shit.
So what's that one thing like everybody has to know?
I have double jointed thumbs.
Well, so what do you value most then?
To put my money in?
No.
Yeah.
But with the added fact that this is all done with their actual long-term partner within earshot of them.
Are they on a date or are they just talking?
All I'm focused on is just like Madeline's right there, like literally just like.
One very crazy part of this is that there are people who no one's interested in. One example is Alexis from season 1 who gave the ultimatum to her boyfriend Hunter, or I'm sorry.
Hunter.
So Alexis winds up having a harder time meeting people than Hunter does. A big reason for this is because she talks a lot about how important money is for her.
What are you looking to get out of your potential partner?
Finances are like so important.
She also makes a point of saying how she's not sure that Hunter is right for her because he doesn't make enough money.
Hunter is not perfect for husband material yet because I make more than him.
For his part, Hunter just seems like a really sweet, quiet, nerdy guy.
Of course I have a wild side. I like sci-fi books.
Yeah.
I'm certain that was edited to come off that way, but come on, that's so funny. It's wild too because Alexis has only been with him for 2 years. Like, just chill out, stop being so weird about money, and let this king have his friends over for D&D every once in a while. The only one of Alexis's dates that we really see much of is her one with Kobe, who decides that he's not into her for some reason.
I have a certain lifestyle that I want. I don't ever want to have a situation where I have to pick, oh, I'm paying for this or this.
Alexis doesn't really form a connection with anyone else and instead just spends the rest of the week saying that Colby's fake.
You can do like 100% better than Colby. I'm just gonna be real with it. I don't think Colby is like a good person. All right.
Oh my goodness.
Very funny to just be like, I want us to take some time apart to create a relationship with someone else, and then that relationship is just enemy for life. But yeah, so at the coupling ceremony, when Hunter sees that Alexis isn't going to be picked by anyone, he proposes to her because he's a kind person. After that, each cast member moves in with the person that they partnered with, and as Nick explains,
They're gonna move in together, meet friends and family, and tackle difficult conversations, and then they're gonna go through the same experience with the person they arrived with.
That's when it gets really juicy.
well, really getting the sense that he cares what happens to these people. A couple of notes here. First of all, when they all move in together after a week, Nick and Vanessa say how this is all part of an accelerated experience. I just think this is pretty funny since the third season of The Ultimatum is called Queer Love and features all femme people. Like, I think that moving in after a week is actually pretty much just the normal process for lesbians. Like, what's next? Are they gonna make them wear enamel pins and go to zine fairs too? Also though, at the beginning of each season, they say that
each of you are compatible with multiple people in this room.
Which, how do they know that? Like, they make that sound very objective, right? I'm just very curious how they determine this compatibility. I know that's kind of a silly question for a reality show like this, but like, the cast have to live with someone they barely know, and sometimes these people are huge creeps.
Just the little things like holding hands and like giving each other hugs.
That's not the only level of intimacy I want to get out of a marriage.
Okay.
If that's physical for you, then we may as well like go back to middle school. A full experience out of a marriage is like sex. Raya said she was open to it.
Raya FaceTimed me. She was like, she's upset, crying. She's like, I think James thinks I want to have sex.
Like, given how weird that guy turned out to be, as well as the fact that multiple cast members of Love is Blind are suing the show for a number of reasons, including one person allegedly being sexually assaulted. And so, yeah, I'm a bit skeptical about how good they are at gauging compatibility. But yeah, the trial marriages, as Nick and Vanessa call them, basically just mean living together for a month, meeting each other's friends and families, and going on a few dates. Something I should say here is that while I think that anyone who received an ultimatum and was made to come onto this show was objectively wronged, there are so many horrifying people on this show, both givers and receivers of ultimatums. This is especially the case in the second season, and while we should always be careful and understand how people act on this show probably isn't an accurate representation of what they are actually like, it really seems like there are multiple extremely abusive relationships in this season. First off is Lisa and Brian, who've been together for just under 2 years. Lisa was the one who gave the ultimatum. Brian's explanation for why he hasn't proposed is that he wants to make sure he's financially secure first. Lisa, on the other hand, says this.
I don't think he's ever been put in a position to where he truly felt like he was going to lose me.
Very healthy. They wind up getting into a big fight during the first week when Lisa gets drunk and sees Brian flirting with another girl. One weird thing is that she says that she's not mad at him for connecting with someone, but is upset that he's not connecting with the person that she wants him.
You sitting there talking to this fucking Hooters bitch. I can see if it was Roxanne, a boss bitch you can actually learn from and be challenged with.
They wind up having a fight in the parking lot. Something to note here is how light it is. Like, when did the show get them to start drinking? Anyway, the fight culminates with Lisa slapping Brian, which, you know, is assault, but then in the next episode it's revealed that she was pregnant, and so they get engaged and leave the show. Then there's Roxanne and Antonio, as well as Alex and Kat. So because Brian and Lisa left, the numbers kind of get messed up, and so everyone just winds up trading partners. I'd describe Antonio and Kat's relationship as less of a romantic connection than a trauma bond. They both just spend their month together dealing with how fucked up they are because of how much the people that they issued ultimatums to have mistreated them.
Living with you, we would like kind of work on things together. I like just kind of shut down a little bit.
I had this like crippling, so I just like operated in like this little square.
I am one of the most selfish people that has ever walked the face of this earth. And
we might be handling this the best. I think we are.
Meanwhile, their partners are off having a great time and shit-talking both of them to their parents.
I've never been with someone, you know, who is on the same level with me.
I think this is the first time that I've thought, oh, maybe there is something that would not allow Alex to be satisfied.
My cat's here with me.
Alex brought a cat too.
She's gone now. Oh.
Remember, these are Alex's parents. Like, they are talking about their future daughter-in-law right now and know that she'll see this. Also, Roxanne's parents are the most insane people I've seen on any of these shows. Her dad fully makes Alex answer a quiz that he printed out.
The mother-in-law, how do you treat the mother-in-law? Do you open the door for her? Do you pull the chair out for her?
I think so. I do.
Not all the time.
Would you marry yourself?
I've never thought about that.
The answer should have been, yes, I would marry myself, and here are the reasons why. You're above average.
Now, when we look into the social media of all the cast members on any of these shows, a pattern begins to emerge where we can see how... Hey, so just wanted to sort of check in here and ask, at this point, how do we actually feel about these shows? Like, do we like them? Do we hate them? Is there a meaningful difference? Also, does anyone else find it really annoying when video essayists ask these kinds of like pretentious rhetorical questions? Just like, what is money? Who are people? Like, we get it. You read a David Graeber book. Can we keep things moving here? By the way, no hate to anyone. Like, I do this too. It's just funny. No, but I mean, I've been making fun of these shows, and obviously I've been very critical. Also, I feel like my usual audience probably aren't huge consumers of Love is Blind and Ultimatum content, but let me just say that very little of what I've said here is significantly different from the kind of thing that you'd hear from a channel who's engaging with this stuff in, like, a pretty sincere way. So, again, what exactly are we doing here? Also, for any brand new viewers who are probably a little bit confused at what's going on right now, basically, the way that I sort of made a name for myself on YouTube was through a series of videos where I'd watch like a bad, obscure reality show and make fun of it and use that to sort of tie things into some sociological concept. And the thing is, whenever I'd make one of these videos, I'll see comments that say how pointless it is that I'm making fun of these shows that I purposefully sought out and decided to watch. And the thing is, that's fair. And so, for this video, I decided to get a little bit meta with it. And so, I'm gonna try to interrogate why it is that we watch bad TV in the first place with what is, by a wide margin, the longest video in my catalog. So, feels good to be back. This is what you assholes were asking for, right? You need me to suffer so that you could have a 2-hour-long video to fold laundry to? That's what it says whenever I open my YouTube analytics. They're just like, the people are clamoring for something to put on when they do their dishes. I was able to find a pretty great paper about this very important phenomenon titled Watching Bad Television, Ironic Consumption, Camp, and Guilty Pleasures by Charles Allen McCoy and Roscoe C. Scarborough. They conducted interviews with 40 people who self-identified as watchers of what they themselves considered to be bad TV. As the title of the paper suggests, the people that they interviewed fell into 3 general categories of viewing habits: guilty pleasure, ironic viewing, and camp. Let's start with guilty pleasure, since it's by far the funniest one. These are people who consume trashy content but justify it either by making sure that the majority of their media diet is very respectable and classy, with the trash content representing an occasional treat. Or, and this is where it gets really deranged, they'll say that because they're smart and educated, it's okay for them to consume trashy content since they know enough not to be affected by it. One interviewee from the study explained why she watches The Hills like this.
What troubles me is if people sit and watch these shows without equipping themselves with critical thinking tools and allow them to be like, my God, like, I have these critical thinking skills and that is why it is possible for me to enjoy it. Because I always have that option of flipping it off, and it has not derailed me from my career or caused any kind of big problem for me because I am viewing this.
I love how she says that these shows probably ruin people's lives, but she's just so smart that she can resist that. It's like, no, I actually think that most people are able to turn their TVs off if they want to. Like, the fact that she's bragging about this makes me think that she might actually be the one with the problem. No, it's fine, because you see, I have critical thinking skills. For most people, it would be a problem if they were hiding in the bathroom at work to watch The Hills. But when I do it, it's okay. It just takes the edge off a little bit. Besides, those weak-willed morons probably think that Heidi is the villain because of how she and Spencer encouraged Jen to make a pass at Brody. I, however, am educated enough to realize that Lauren and Brody were never exclusive and that all the drama that she caused was completely fake and honestly just so typical of how she operates. What I'm trying to say is that if you or a loved one are talking about The Hills in the same way that someone would discuss injecting cocaine between their toes, then it might be time to cancel that Hayu subscription. Personally, I'm fine though. In fact, watching this stuff actually helps me be creative, and so it's essentially medicine when I do it. Definitely nothing to worry about there. Now, but since that's, an insane way to live, it's much more common for viewers to instead find some way to recontextualize things so that it makes the act of watching in some way good. enter irony and camp. The way that ironic viewing works is that instead of feeling guilt for enjoying a piece of media that they see as beneath them, ironic watchers will instead recontextualize their consumption. A sincere drama is turned into a comedy when, rather than taking it seriously, the viewers make fun of it. The entertainment then becomes making commentary about the media instead of the media itself. A crucial detail here is that an ironic viewer positions themselves as being above the media that they're consuming, and, by extension, anyone who earnestly enjoys it. I don't think that this is universally true for everyone who does this, but a problem with irony viewing is that since putting something down becomes a sign of intelligence, there can be an unwillingness to earnestly enjoy things for fear of outing yourself as one of the suckers. Like, have you ever had that moment of panic where someone makes an ironic joke about a show or movie that you actually like? They're just like, dude really gives off the vibe of someone who's saving up to buy a Homelander Funko Pop. Wait, what's wrong with The Boys? Is The Boys cringe? I should also give the disclaimer that when I say irony here and throughout this video, what I'm describing isn't all irony, but one specific kind in the form of ironic watching, which I'd characterize as being, among other things, extremely negative, cynical, and deeply revolted by sincerity. That's what I'm going to mean whenever I talk about irony moving forward, but irony can be a lot more than that. It can be creative, it can be a sign of community, and even positive. For example, there's the last form of hate watching, camp. I really hope this doesn't come off as homophobic, but I feel like if you're already watching a multi-hour long media analysis video essay, you probably don't need me to tell you what camp means. Just in case though, here's a quick explanation. Most basically, camp is when something is so bad that it goes back around to being great. This isn't so much a quality of the media itself, although some media lends itself way more to camp than others. Instead, camp more refers to a sensibility that allows people to enjoy this kind of thing. Susan Sontag describes this in her famous essay Notes on Camp, saying that, quote,
"There exists, indeed, a good taste of bad taste."
While on its surface, camp viewing works very similarly to irony viewing, so much so that I think that it's fair to call camp a type of irony as well. However, there are some key differences too. First of all, while anything bad could be a reasonable target for irony watching, not just any piece of trash media qualifies as camp. Instead, camp is all about, quoting Sontag again here,
"The sensibility of failed seriousness."
Essentially, it's not enough for something to just be bad. Instead, camp is the result of trying to be great and then failing. In a sense, that feels way meaner than irony, right? Just like, it's not enough for this movie to just be bad. For me to enjoy it, I need to know that what I'm watching represents the director's dream dying. The thing is though, that while irony is all about putting media down, camp is instead about lifting it up. Sontag writes,
"People who share this sensibility are not laughing at the thing they label as a camp. They're enjoying it. Camp is a tender feeling."
You get the same sense with the people interviewed in the study. There's a sort of sweetness to how they talk about watching bad movies.
You watch this movie and you get the sense that everyone is very serious about this movie. The actors are doing the best that they can, regardless of how good or bad an actor they are. They're giving it their all. Like, the directors and the creators have this passion about it. But the movie is horrible in the sense that the acting is bad, the story is bad. There are plot lines that don't make sense. You know, the set looks cheap, you can tell it's like a green screen. And so the fun of watching those kind of movies is that, you know, you can just sort of laugh at them. Because they are taking themselves really seriously. And they don't think it's silly. They think it's very serious. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. The ones I like the best and what I'm looking for is people who had a vision. You can tell that they had an idea that they were really passionate about and they tried to execute it on the screen, but it just doesn't work.
Despite these differences though, irony and camp do still have a lot in common. Both are ways of enjoying bad media through a sort of ironic meta-awareness and find humor where it wasn't intended. They're also both group activities. This makes a lot of sense since it'd be pretty weird to watch these kinds of bad movies and TV shows alone. Instead, the people in the interviews all talk about watching with their friends or partners. I think that's kind of like really cool that by changing the meaning of how they interact with this content, they also transform watching TV or movies, something that's generally seen as a very passive and solitary thing to do, into an active social activity. And speaking of transforming the content, I think that this is the most important characteristic that both irony and camp share. For them to work, they need to be engaging with the media in a way that wasn't intended by the creator. Here's how Sontag describes this.
One must distinguish between naive and deliberate camp. Pure camp is always naive. Camp which knows itself to be camping, is usually less satisfying. The pure examples of camp are unintentional. They are dead serious.
An example of this is Sheena from Vanderpump Rules. As much as her self-awareness makes her a lot more endearing to me, I imagine that hasn't been particularly good for her career.
I'm not the best singer. I do enjoy singing. I love doing karaoke. Am I gonna do that as a career? No. Singing is something I had the opportunity to do. And if I can put out a few songs and perform them at a few different gay clubs, I'm gonna have fun doing that.
No, Sheena, you're not supposed to openly want an ironic gay fan base. You're supposed to settle for performing entirely at gay clubs after it becomes clear that you'll never be a true global pop star. Failed seriousness, remember? This is exactly why you'll never be Erika Jayne. I think this is a particularly big issue for Netflix shows. They all have this irreverent tone that makes them impossible to mock. For instance, I've had so many people suggest that I watch Nailed It, a bake-off show for home cooks that really leans into making fun of contestants messing up complicated desserts. On paper, this couldn't be any more up my alley, except rather than being shot with the sort of hyper-seriousness you normally see from cooking shows, on Nailed It, they lean into the silliness with the host and even contestants making fun of the bad cooking.
He's got a happy face there. Just be happy I knew it was a happy face. What voice do you think your princess has? Hi, guys.
This is, to put it mildly, a war crime. If the explicit point of the show is to poke fun at it, then what the fuck am I doing here? Like, for me, the very act of watching these shows should feel like bullying. As soon as that's gone and it's clear that I'm engaging with the show on its own terms after all, then I might as well just watch something that's actually good. Like, I feel like the only way that I could enjoy Nailed It would be if I went all the way back around and started, like, crying because the host is being too mean. Or, I don't know, it's a long shot, but maybe I could recapture some of that bullying feeling if I found a way to get Nailed It canceled on Twitter for romanticizing negative self-talk. Honestly though, you could kind of argue that guilty pleasure viewing is, in this sense, the most subversive way to watch something. Like, there's plenty of media that's meant to be watched ironically, or can't be on purpose, but I feel like no one works on a show with the specific intention of making a 31-year-old teacher hate herself for watching it. Now, if you're currently trying to figure out which one of these you fall into, sorry if this ruins the BuzzFeed phrenology quiz that you're developing, but McCoy and Scarborough note that no one only does just one of these. While we may all favor one over the others, we all switch between them without even noticing. With that being said, I definitely do tend to fall into ironic viewing. It's something I do for fun with my friends, and also has been the thing that's largely responsible for me having a career on the internet. If you've seen any of my other videos about reality TV, you know I'm not exactly watching these shitty shows for camp. I'm not just like, this show helping Airbnb hosts gentrify their neighborhoods is iconic. Let me uplift it through earnest enjoyment. No. Here at We're in Hell, we're haters. And so that's what we're going to focus on in this video, because as much as I do love to hate, just saying that out loud, maybe that's not the best tendency in the world. And so, to explain why this might not be the best, let's look at another paper about bad TV by coming back to David Foster Wallace and his essay, E Unibus Plurum. First of all, to anyone who may have cringed at me bringing up DFW, let me just say that it's gonna get so much worse. I feel like people tend to hate David Foster Wallace in the same way that they hate, like, Rick and Morty and Father John Misty. By the way, I like Father John Misty, which you can probably tell if you've noticed literally anything about me. But I only started listening to them in like 2019 without really knowing anything about his reputation. And like the way people reacted when I told them that I was getting into him, it was fully the same response I would have gotten if I had just been like, yeah, I've been really getting into this comedian. His name's Bill Cosby. Have you ever heard of him? Generally, I think that people's issue isn't so much with the art itself, so much as the people who like it, which honestly is pretty fair. Like, Infinite Jest in particular is an all-time fave of every humanities grad student who's creepy towards women in his tutorials. Personally, my stance on David Foster Wallace is that I agree with almost every criticism people have about him, but also think that he's a really, really good writer regardless. And in terms of what I'm talking about here, he's pretty undeniably the guy when it comes to postmodern irony poisoning, and that's largely thanks to the essay E Unibus Plurum. The essay opens with Wallace talking about a statistic he read that the average American, who he refers to throughout the article as Joe Briefcase, watches 6 hours of TV every day. A fact that sounds insane until I looked at how much time I spend looking at my phone. Gen X was wild for sitting in their living rooms to watch 6 hours of TV every day. Simply by having my phone in my pocket, I make that look like rookie numbers. I think that DFW does a really good job of specifying that he's not against TV or saying that it rots your brain or anything like that, but instead makes it clear that his issues are more to do with how we should take TV more seriously, and also that 6 hours a day is just much too much. He then goes on to use those points to make a really fascinating argument. He begins this by absolutely reading me to filth.
Surely we all have friends we just hate to hear talk about TV because they so clearly loathe it. They sneer relentlessly at the hackneyed plots, the unlikely dialogue, the cheese whiz resolutions, the bland condescension of the news anchors, the shrill wheedling of commercials, and yet are just as clearly obsessed with it. Somehow need to hate their 6 hours a day, day in and out. Junior advertising executives, aspiring filmmakers, and graduate school poets are, in my experience, especially prone to this condition, where they simultaneously hate, fear, and need television and try to disinfect themselves of whatever so much viewing might do to them by watching TV with weary irony instead of the rapt credulity most of us grew up with.
So, first of all, brutal. That was absolutely uncalled for. Wallace goes on to give some pretty compelling reasons for not liking irony that aren't just personal attacks against me, though. One thing he goes after is the assumption that a detached, ironic disposition makes you smart. I think that this is probably one of the most alluring things about irony. When you're watching something with an ironic cynicism, it feels like you're seeing a magic trick from the wrong angle. Unlike those rubes who are feeling a genuine sense of wonder and amazement, you can sit back, smugly aware that that guy didn't actually have a quarter behind his ear at all. One big counter to this claim, though, is that if being ironic and cynical really was all it took to see like you're wearing the sunglasses from They Live, then why is irony featured so prominently in advertising? To make this point, Wallace brings up an essay called Deride and Conquer by Mark Crispin Miller. The majority of the essay is just a close reading of this one Pepsi commercial. The commercial is set on a beach during a hot day, people are sweating, lying around, there's a dog in a cute hat. It's like I'm there. Then a guy pulls up in a van with some speakers, turns on the sound system, and starts a live ASMR performance where he opens a bottle of Pepsi, causing everyone on the beach to run over and buy pop out of the back of his unlabeled white van, while a voiceover says,
Pepsi, the choice of a new generation.
In his essay, Miller argues that what's so fascinating about the commercial is that at no point in it do they say anything about Pepsi being good. Instead, the ad is all about how cleverly they're able to manipulate the people on the beach. In that sense, the thing that they're actually advertising isn't how tasty or refreshing Pepsi is. Instead, they've made a commercial that advertises how good they are at advertising. In this context, I don't think that the slogan at the end calling Pepsi the choice of a new generation can be read as anything other than ironic. What choice is being made here exactly? No one in the ad freely picks Pepsi, they're manipulated into it. Miller claims that this represents a shift in advertising that happened around the 80s. Before then, this ad would be like someone drinking Pepsi and being transported to a tropical oasis or whatever. The focus of these pre-irony ads would be on how great the experience of consuming the product is in order to disguise said consumption as something other than the economic exchange that it really is. This shift in self-referential ads represents a massive change, since now, rather than offering the fantasy of a temporary release from being an economic actor in the market, these ads will instead remind the viewer of that dynamic. In other words, this was the point where TV became completely meta. Now, just to be clear here, TV was self-referential and even ironic well before the 80s. I think that Miller overgeneralizes a lot. Like, he also says that sincere commercials are in the vast minority now, which is straight up not true. That said, I don't think that he's particularly off base to say that by the 80s, postmodernism had become prevalent in mainstream pop culture and advertising. I'm not gonna bore you with a whole big explanation of postmodernism here, because this is the kind of video that really respects your time. I will say, though, that I think that the correct way to think about postmodernism is as a set of conditions that we are living under, and that the thing that all this art, literature, philosophy, and architecture have in common is that they are all responses to those conditions. In terms of film and literature, that response generally takes the form of experimental narratives, ironic and absurdist humor, references to pop culture, and metatextuality. The thing that's important about that last one is that whenever a work calls attention to itself as art, that means that the fact that it is being observed is part of the work, which makes the viewer an explicit participant in the art. And this is exactly what Miller thinks is so dangerous about ironic advertising. He argues that when advertisers break the fourth wall, instead of causing us to disengage and think more critically, instead, since metatextuality makes the observer part of the art, this actually reinforces our role as passive subjects who contribute purely through consumption. So I love this essay. It feels like it was made exactly for me. We got an over-analysis of a dumb and insignificant piece of trash culture, it's tied to the rise of neoliberalism, and a lot of things he says are kind of a massive stretch. The only way this could be any more my shit would be if every paragraph began with him either saying "and so" or "also though," and he used the word "which" like a semicolon. And so, after I read it, I was stoked to see what else this Miller guy had written, so I looked him up and, oh man, turns out that if you go to Mark Crispin Miller's Wikipedia page, very little of it talks about his fantastic media criticism. Instead, it mostly just talks about his controversial theories about what happened at Sandy Hook, and, you know, everything else that you would expect someone like that to think. It's honestly pretty sad. Also though, coming back to someone completely unproblematic, David Foster Wallace's issues with irony go deeper than it not being subversive enough. Throughout his essay, DFW describes irony as a sort of inescapable trap where the meta self-awareness of modern TV shows makes them feel all-encompassing. I know that sounds kind of weird, but stay with me here. To show you what I'm talking about, let's examine the most important aspect of Love is Blind, and for that matter, all of Chris Colin's Netflix shows: the metal cups. So I referenced this in my opening, but for anyone who doesn't watch these shows and was probably a bit confused by that whole thing, on these shows, all the cups are metal, and when I say that, I really mean every cup, no matter how out of place it is. They'll bring metal cups on picnics. They drink out of them in their kitchen where you can clearly see glasses in the cupboards behind them. They're served them at restaurants and bars. They even drink hot coffee out of them. An odd detail too is that each show has its own color scheme, with gold cups for Love is Blind, silver for The Ultimatum, and white plastic for Perfect Match, which, by the way, I'm getting to. Oh yeah, I bet you thought you were safe, didn't you, Francesca? So what's going on here? The basic answer is that pretty much all reality shows only use opaque glasses so that they can cut up clips from completely different points without any continuity issues. For example, if I drink this out of a clear glass, can't fuck up this pour or else it's over for me. Nice. You'd be able to notice how the amount of liquid changes from shot to shot. Although in that case, I was just hiding in my mouth to trick you. For an example of this that isn't just a clever ruse, look at the food on the plates in this scene from Love is Blind. I think I may have actually found something that beer snobs in YouTube comment sections hate more than pouring a lot of head. Very warm. If you didn't know about this, keep an eye out for it the next time that you watch reality TV. Once you know about this, you can't unsee it. That said, this alone is fairly common knowledge and nothing groundbreaking. What I find interesting is how, while other reality shows will try to be subtle about this, generally using cups that don't seem too out of place, or else just keeping glasses out of the shot as much as possible, on any of Chris Colin's shows on Netflix, the cups are front and center. The cast will joke about them on camera.
A past life. Like you were Caesar and I was Cleopatra. Bet they had cups like this.
Indeed.
Or there's a reunion episode in season 4 where they play a game of soccer and one of the teams is called
The Golden Goblets.
A bunch of former cast members also commemorated their experience by getting matching cup tattoos. Love is Blind even sells licensed golden cups and now their own brand of wine called Love is Wine, which comes in a golden bottle and features very prominently in the newest season. But it gets weirder. When asked about it in an interview for Variety, Cohen said that the reason for the metal cups is essentially just because he likes the look.
I don't know. It's something like, when you turn on a show, you know it's our show. It's very authentic, really true following of these people's journeys. But I like the fact that we have this sort of connective tissue with that in a really light way. It's fun.
And that's a bit of a weird response, right? Like, first of all, who the fuck describes drinking out of a metal cup as something they like? You know, it'd be fun if this drink had a weird metallic flavor. But also, as I just explained, that's clearly not the reason for the metal cups, right? This isn't a secret either. Literally every article I found that talked about this explains how the cups were used for editing. It's possible that Cohen is just bullshitting here, but if that's the case, then why make the cups so prominent in the first place? It really doesn't seem to me like this is something that he's trying to hide. In fact, it's the opposite. In the very first episode of Love is Blind, you can see someone drinking out of a glass cup. But as the seasons progress, the cups have become more and more prominent, with them seemingly going out of their way to highlight them in later seasons. My theory is that these two explanations aren't actually in conflict at all. Remember that all of these shows are extremely aware of themselves as shows. They could have easily gotten them opaque mugs to drink out of here, but they also could have edited out the times that the cast members talked to producers or mentioned that they watched the show. No, by making a mundane part of television production into branding, they have made a very intentional aesthetic choice to draw attention to the fact that this is a highly produced and edited TV show. And what's really strange about this is that you would think that being so brazen about this kind of thing would shatter the artifice of these shows, effectively ruining them, but it seems like the opposite is true. Being so open, even about the fact that they use dishonest editing, they seem more trustworthy, not less. Looking at this quote again, it seems kind of random how Cohen abruptly brings up how authentic the show is, seemingly out of nowhere, but when we think about it in this context, it makes perfect sense that he would see the authenticity of the show as being deeply related to any discussion of the cups. The authenticity and truth of the show is bolstered by the unabashed fakeness represented by the cups through a strange sort of meta self-awareness that is, in a word, ironic. And so, if the weird production details aren't a way out of the show, then let's try turning to social media instead. The cast of these shows have been extremely candid about their experiences, often turning the content that they make about being on the show into full-blown careers. And so there's a lot of details that we can learn about them. For example, you know how I've talked about how Raven and SK seem like a really good couple? Well, it turns out that guy was actually cheating on her an insane amount.
It kind of all came at different times with different women, but it started with one girl who he'd actually met in San Francisco. And when I found out about it, I found out with everyone else on TikTok. Randomly, I want to say it was like early in the afternoon, and just my phone started going crazy. Everyone sending it to me. Did you see this? This is with the first girl that he met in San Francisco on Hinge.
Or take this moment from season 1 when Damien tells his fiancée Giannina that she needs to tone down her politics.
Politics can be an issue in family, friends.
You think politics will be an issue?
You are very opinionated, but I'm just saying.
And I do have like my own political opinions. Those will not change.
In any aspect at all.
No.
Babe, I told you, one of my boundaries is women voting. Don't you love me? No, but like, setting aside how insane it is to get engaged to someone with different politics than you, and your solution is just that they aren't allowed to talk about it, I'm kind of curious about what those politics that she's apparently needing to tone down are, right? Like, is she Q-pilled or black bloc? The people need to know. So going through her Instagram, she made this post about voting for Biden right after the 2020 election with an honestly pretty dope caption about how she doesn't identify with either party because neither one of them adequately addresses climate change. Damien, on the other hand, doesn't really talk about his politics much, but going through his Instagram, you can see that the only politician he follows is Trump, along with a bunch of conservative accounts, which paints a pretty clear picture of what his problem with Giannina's politics probably were. And hey, just checking in again here. Does this feel at all like we're peeling back the layers and getting in some way outside of the show? Or are we more in it now than ever? Because to me, it kind of feels like the latter, you know? I think that a big reason for this is because all these shows feel shockingly connected to social media. For instance, in every season of Love is Blind, at the end of the vacation, there's a sort of ceremony where they're all given back their phones.
They have their devices back and they're headed home.
You'll get your phones and devices back. But will you allow the opinion of family and friends, the distractions of social media, to sabotage your wedding? We also have your phones.
Finally, selfie. Come here. I'm sending everyone.
This is taken even further in The Ultimatum, where social media plays kind of a massive role. First of all, a lot of the people on the show are influencers.
Zay works nightlife. He does influencing and club promoting. Are they not posting me because they just want to look available?
April, she has like 50,000 subscribers.
But also, and I don't know if I've seen this before, on most shows like this, the cast are very much contained with what feels like a very set schedule and not much contact with the outside world. On The Ultimatum, though, these people seem to regularly go out partying without cameras and are extremely active on social media. Like, there are major plot points that happen because a cast member will see something on their partner's Instagram story.
Has been texting me a lot of guys. I've seen her with all these other dudes on Instagram.
And finally, there's Perfect Match, which honestly goes further with this than I ever thought possible. Perfect Match feels like what would happen if watching the autoplay previews for Netflix reality shows while on acid was turned into its own show hosted by Nick Lachey. I think this is probably the closest that we can get to experiencing what I imagine makes up the ambient hum of Chris Colin's mind. The cast of the show is made up of people from other Netflix reality shows who now go on these shows for a living.
I'm Ann Sophie. I'm from Selling Tampa, and I'm here to find my perfect match.
I'm Nick, and I'm from The Circle, Season 3.
I'm the winner of Season 1 of The Circle.
In terms of finding something outside the show, this takes things to a whole new level. Like, the people on this show make small talk by discussing what it's like being professional reality TV stars.
So everyone in there is in like our circle.
What reality show were you?
Circle.
Well, I was super interested in everyone's had a similar experience in here.
What season?
3.
3, okay, I haven't seen that one.
Wow.
Think about the level of meta this show is on. First of all, these people are professional reality stars on a dating show, and so obviously they're presenting a played up and manicured image of themselves.
I'm savage.
I don't feel like he's here for the right reasons.
I love you.
But at the same time, they'll reference the shows that they were on in ways that clearly undercut their seriousness.
Whether it's proposing to somebody that you've never seen, saying I'm looking at you.
If I was on Love is Blind, would you propose to me?
100%.
Would you?
Yeah.
Or entering into a trial marriage with not one but two different women, my man Zay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diamond. I got engaged, but it did not work out as planned.
I gave you your ring back.
I don't give a fuck about a ring.
I like how they just gloss over how this last woman's engagement ended because her fiance told her that he was bi and she wasn't okay with that. But yeah, for sure, her ex sounds crazy. Also, I just want to point out this guy Dom from The Mole. Yeah, I can't believe they got him either. If for some reason you're wondering what The Mole is, you are correct. Absolutely no one has seen it, and it's very funny. Like, throughout the season, new people keep being brought in, and Dom will just desperately try to explain the show to people who have no idea what he's talking about.
I spent the summer in Australia filming my last show.
What show?
It's called The Mole.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Basically, the premise of The Mole is that they flew a bunch of people to Australia and had them do what are essentially high-budget escape rooms to win money, except one of the contestants is secretly the mole, meaning that they're trying to sabotage things. Of any Netflix show, this one honestly sounds like it'd be the most fun to be on, but Dom feels very differently.
The basis of my show is literally all about lying and cheating.
I love how in this scene where Nick Lachey is joking with all the cast about the silly things that he played a role in manipulating them into doing, Dom just has this 1,000-yard stare. It's so funny too. Later on, he gets reunited with the guy who fucked him over on The Mole, and they have this interaction.
The structure of our show was based around manipulation.
I fucked with everybody's emotions I possibly could.
Water under the bridge, bro. The last thing I want is like for us to go back into mole mode.
Are you fucking kidding me? What the fuck is mole mode? Bro, this is not the place to go mole mode, so leave your 6-fingered claws at the door, stay above ground, and don't let any of the girls catch you eating worms. This is just a little joke for the moles watching. I think I can tell mole jokes, you know? Like, as long as it's the type of joke that, like, a mole would laugh at. Like, if they would sit here and be like, yeah, we do that, like, he noticed, like, then you're laughing with them. Like, it's for the right reasons, you know? I think I tread that line. Anyhow, the way that Perfect Match works is that the cast all have to live together in this villa that I assume the show rents as part of a timeshare for Bond villains. The show is a sort of dating contest where each night they all have to find someone to partner with or else they'll be eliminated. Then, during the days, they have to compete to see who's the most compatible couple by doing the most convoluted challenges I think I've ever seen.
Today's compatibility challenge is all about how well you know your current partner. Today's compatibility challenge is all about how you communicate. Challenge is very simple. I'm gonna present you with a series of tasks. The listener is gonna have to navigate an obstacle course blindfolded. The men or the women will bid on how well they think their couple can do in completing the task. You'll each kiss your current partner, plus all the other potential matches, blindfolded and wearing headphones. If you complete that task, the couple with the lowest bid will be eliminated. The listener must collect 10 cubes from the course. The cubes will be stacked on a platform balanced between their partner's legs. Knots down, 3 knots down, 4. Each couple will have to soak themselves in this giant pool of water you see. You will then head to your assigned squeezing area. 2 to go.
They're all loose.
You will score each of your kisses until you fill the container with enough water that the ping pong ball floats to the top. 9 knots down, final knot. The couple who receives the highest combined and aggregated total scores will win.
The couple that proves their compatibility this way wins a romantic date, and more importantly, they get to go to this weird little room where they pick someone from one of the existing pairs to set up on a blind date with a new Netflix reality show star who gets brought in. Also, a weird detail about this room is that whenever a couple goes in, Nick Lachey is hiding somewhere in the room and jumps out to scare them.
What's up, guys?
Oh,
Oh my god!
Hey.
Nick!
Guys, welcome to the boardroom.
Your perfect match, like Shane and Chloe.
It also doesn't look to me like this was an intentionally planned part of the show. Like, I think that's just a thing Nick Lachey likes doing to people. Like, that's just how he gets his sick little kicks.
dude, you just pop out of nowhere sometimes.
Man, I'm sneaky like that.
So obviously a lot of people use this room as a way to manipulate people or break up couples.
Carousel and Chase.
Carousel and Chase don't match on like a romantic level, I have another option for me.
But more often, they play matchmaker in a way that seems meant to demonstrate how we, the audience, are supposed to think about these people.
You know, Nick being funny, goofy, and silly will match with Izzy's personality really well. Come on, buddy.
Oh, he looks so happy. The fact that he went through the whole process and went on Love is Blind proves that he is ready for marriage.
Let's talk about Dom.
This poor kid has been through a lot.
Let's go with Colony.
They look fucking hot together.
Like, that's not how you talk about a couple that you know. It's how you talk when you're debating who would win in a fight between Wolverine and Frieza. Looking over all these shows now, you can really see a progressive escalation of ironic self-awareness, from Love is Blind putting the fourth wall breaks front and center, to The Ultimatum with the cast's real social media accounts being a major part of the show, and now the meta Netflix reality show crossover event that is Perfect Match, which is so completely self-referential that I don't know how much it could actually be enjoyed without a degree of ironic detachment. And all of this fits with David Foster Wallace's critique.
What explains the pointlessness of most published TV criticism is that television has become immune to charges that it lacks any meaningful connection to the world outside it. It's not that charges of non-connection have become untrue, it's that any such connection has become odious. Television used to point beyond itself. Those of us born in like the 60s were trained to look where it pointed, usually at versions of real life made prettier, sweeter, better by succumbing to a product or temptation. Today's audience is way better trained, and TV has discarded what's not needed. A dog, if you point at something, will look only at your finger.
So, first of all, damn, if I could write that well, I wouldn't kill myself. I'd be happy. But yeah, to say that any of these shows are fake or disconnected is missing the point so much that it's almost laughable. Oh, what? It's all edited? Yeah, they're very upfront about that fact. Not just the metal cups either. In almost every season reunion of Love is Blind, the cast members always say that it wasn't an accurate portrayal.
I mean, you only see 10% of it on the camera. There was so much stuff that happened.
If you had this chance right now, what do you want to address that is misunderstood?
Every single conversation was pushing a narrative that wasn't ours.
But while all of this seems to be a way to pull back the curtain, instead, it just extends it to encompass even more. Okay, so if we can't find a way out through production details or social media, let's finally talk about some stuff that it's safe to say that Chris Colin really doesn't want us to know. How Love is Blind actually treats its cast members. Throughout the entire run of this show, former cast members have spoken out to discuss the shitty ways that they were treated. The first one of these to gain much attention was Jessica from season 1. So, in that season, Jessica gets engaged to Mark, and their relationship comes off looking rough. I'm not going to go through everything here, but the basic gist is that while in the pods, Jessica is in a double love triangle where she's talking to two guys, Mark and Barnett. She dumps Mark so that she can be with Barnett, who in turn dumps her to be with Amber. And so Jessica gets back together with Mark, and when they meet, it's very clear that she's not into him.
You're going shirtless?
Yep.
This is him, and I'm struggling a little bit.
This continues with Jessica not being affectionate and making lots of jabs at Mark.
Waking up with Jessica, it's everything. I woke up and I just looked at her and I was happy.
A couple things that were really good that happened last night. One, you don't snore and you don't sweat. So we could potentially like be in the cuddle zone.
I'm shocked at how comfortable we are.
While also being shown to be extremely into Barnett, generally while drunk.
I'm great. How are you?
Best buddy.
Oh yeah, we're best friends.
Nothing will ever break the bond we made.
I know.
Literally.
We got a friendship.
I'm gonna go after your dude. I know you, baby. I'm physically attracted to Barnett.
This is, again, all while she's making it clear that she's not interested in Mark, who's always presented as patiently putting up with everything while trying to make the relationship work.
Before we went to bed, Jessica was telling me about how she doesn't know if she can get there with me physically. I keep battling and I keep fighting, and even now when
Unsurprisingly, for the crime of wanting to get out of what is essentially an arranged marriage, Jessica became the season's villain and received a massive amount of hate online. This was especially bad since the show aired right at the start of the pandemic when everyone was miserable and had nothing better to do than harass a random woman. And while I think that we can all agree that someone being mean to a guy who she's known for 2 weeks is a very good and fair reason to try to destroy her life, the thing is that, according to Jessica, everything I just described was also presented in a completely misleading way. Jessica has said that as soon as she saw Mark, she knew that she didn't want to marry him, but was told by the producers that she wasn't allowed to leave the show until the wedding. She also said that she and Mark discussed all of this and were on the same page. This is all apparently an extremely common experience for people on Love is Blind. However, thankfully, this is one issue that may have been remedied. The contracts for the cast members on the latest season were allegedly leaked and allegedly contain the following clause.
I further understand that my appearance, depiction, and portrayal in and connection with the program, or otherwise, and my actions and the actions of others displayed in and in connection with the program, or otherwise, may be disparaging, defamatory, embarrassing, or of an otherwise unfavorable nature, may expose me to public ridicule, humiliation, or condemnation, and may portray me in a false light.
So yeah, it's good to hear that they're taking this seriously and have allegedly taken the necessary steps to ensure that they can't get sued for continuing to do this. Now, to be fair here, the producers of the show have denied Jessica's claims that she wasn't free to leave the show, and it's entirely possible that they're telling the truth. It's very important to remember here that these accusations are just that, and we truly don't know all the facts. In the end, the one thing that I think that we can all agree on here is that I shouldn't get sued for anything that I'm saying right now. Now, with that being said, I would also add that Nick from season 2 has claimed that his contract stated that if he left the show early, he could be forced to pay up to $50,000 in damages.
I agree that $50,000 is a reasonable estimate of the amount of damages producer is likely to suffer in the event of any discontinuation, considering all of the circumstances existing as of the date of this agreement.
Make of that what you will. Again, we likely won't ever learn the full truth, and so to some extent, this will always be a matter of the cast members' words against the producers. Although, one party there is at a pretty big disadvantage, considering that the people on the show were all made to sign NDAs, and cont'd has actually sued at least one former cast member for $4 million for speaking out about the way that she was treated on set. Again, this is all just my personal opinion, and as far as I'm aware, nothing has been proven, but just for me personally, I am a bit more sympathetic to the cast members here than cont'd, and that's all I'm going to say about that. There are also more serious accusations. For instance, Jeremy Hartwell, a cast member from season 2, has been very vocal about the way they were treated on set, claiming that the cast was largely deprived of sleep, food, and water while being given copious amounts of alcohol and were expected to be on camera for extremely long days of shooting. And I feel like hearing that definitely gives a very different meaning to the branding of the show's wine, Love is Wine. Like, yeah, I bet it was. In 2022, Hartwell filed a lawsuit against Netflix, cont'd Content, and cont'd's casting company Delirium TV for inhumane working conditions, paying less than minimum wage, and incorrectly classifying the cast members as independent contractors. Since then, 2 more cast members have filed suits against cont'd, both alleging the same mistreatment that Hartwell described, as well as claiming that they were abused and SA'd by their fiancés while on the show. cont'd has responded to these lawsuits in more or less the same way that I've seen them respond to any and all accusations, which has been by saying that they're not true, and that in the case of Jeremy Hartwell, he's just bitter because he didn't meet anyone on the show. Something that is actually kind of dope that's come out of this, though, is that Jeremy and one of the other cast members from his season, Nick, have actually gone on to start the UCAN Foundation, or the Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network Foundation. I'll be honest, the acronym is a little bit clunky. Also, there's a lot of other groups called UCAN, which made it pretty hard to look them up. You know, I feel like just because they have unscripted in their name didn't mean that they had to go with the first name they could think of. But joking aside, UCAN is a charitable foundation that provides mental health and legal support to cast members of reality shows, which is unironically a very cool thing to do. Now, I don't want to minimize anything that happened to these people by suggesting that it's all just entertainment, plus I very much doubt that the producers of these shows were planning to integrate active court proceedings in the same way that they did social media. But there is something very interesting with how the websites, magazines, and TV shows that have covered the allegations are very often the same ones who will also run articles breathlessly summarizing the drama from the newest season. UCAN even posted a reel at the beginning of the latest season where Nick outlines the problems with these shows, but doesn't tell people not to watch, but instead to remember that what you see isn't an accurate representation of the cast members. Essentially saying to keep watching, but in a way that's even more detached. Do you see how this feels like a sort of trap? Like something that would make David Foster Wallace go mole mode? While ironic cynicism feels like a way to be outside of the media, allowing us to knowingly look down on it, TV is so ironic, so self-referential, and so in on the joke that the place that you're most likely to hear criticisms of TV is on TV. This also goes so much more for social media. I'm trying not to go into that too much, mostly because I don't want to bore you, but isn't that fucked up how the effect of it being so widely understood that social media is horrible for us has been that instead of changing anything, we all just roll our eyes and think it's hack and cringe when people point this out? I call this the old Catholic priest technique. Now, at this point, we might want to ask why any of this irony stuff matters at all. For DFW, the answer was that 6 hours a day stat, which I think that we can all probably agree is a bit much. And today, that's only gotten worse with social media and the rise of custom, on-demand content that makes us even more hooked on this stuff than ever before. The problem with all this, again, isn't that we're consuming this kind of thing at all, but that it doesn't seem to me that our consumption is a matter of our personal choice, but a choice that's been made for us, and one that we're not very good at turning down. This is obviously a big, complicated problem that I'm not going to claim to be remotely qualified to properly answer, although I think that it's reasonable to say that this isn't necessarily purely a technological issue, but a cultural one as well. Like, coming back to that study about people who hate watch, and especially the guilty pleasure watchers, I'm not going to claim that this is the most pressing issue we face, but like, it doesn't feel like too much of a stretch to say that we could all stand to have better tools of discernment when it comes to the media that we consume. This is the kind of big problem of modernity that tends to get pointed out by Twitter blue checks with Roman bust profile pics who are arguing that we've lost objective standards in art because of woke, but Sydney Sweeney's boobs will save us. By the way, those are all real conservative talking points, and I didn't have to look any of them up. That's just what my Twitter feed looks like now. Just feels like that site's really going mole. Anyways, David Foster Wallace mentions this kind of regressive take, but rejects it on the grounds that the people who want to return to a time before woke pronouns and women's suffrage are, to use a technical term, fucking morons. Instead, in an argument that I really like, DFW points out that the job of providing people with moral and aesthetic tools of discernment used to, and should again, belong to art. I really love this because not only does this take correctly reject all the weird fascist "this is what they took from us" talking points, but on just a basic level, it makes way more sense too. Like, when I read good books, it makes me better at reading and writing. Same goes for when I watch good movies or TV, but I don't think that the same holds true as much for trash TV, and I say this as someone who's made a career out of watching this stuff. It also definitely doesn't hold true for social media. The problem is that for art to do its job here, it has to be able to criticize and challenge the dominant forms of media. But since postmodern irony is already the media's native tongue, you can't use it to criticize it. You can't out-irony TV or the internet. And so, for Wallace, the solution is sincerity.
The next real literary rebels in this country might well emerge as some weird bunch of anti-rebels, born oglers who dare to back away from ironic watching, who have the childish gall actually to endorse single entendre values. Real rebels, as far as I can see, risk things, risk disapproval. The old postmodern insurgents risked the gasp and squeal, shock, disgust, outrage, censorship, accusations of socialism, anarchism, nihilism. The new rebels might be the ones willing to risk the yawn, the rolled eyes, the cool smile, the nudged ribs, the parody of gifted ironists, the how banal accusations of sentimentality, melodrama, credulity, willingness to be suckered by a world of lurkers and starers who fear gaze and ridicule above imprisonment without law.
Damn, it's crazy this guy was such a good writer that he can get me nodding along to him, essentially saying that conservatism is the new punk rock. But actually, I can see where he's coming from, and there is definitely some truth to this. For instance, it addresses one of the biggest issues with irony, which is that people will seem almost afraid of genuinely liking something. There is actually a lot of value in being able to say, I'm cringe, but I'm free. In fact, maybe the new form of irony is actually just going as hard into sincerity as possible. I mean, have you seen Greg's channel lately? With that said, in general, I disagree with him here for a few reasons. For one, just on a personal level, I can't stand people whose whole thing is like being sincere. This is generally the territory of positivity influencers, people who think that their refusal to critically engage with media is a moral virtue, and just insufferably sanctimonious freaks. Beyond just that, I don't think that this solves the problem. When I was researching this, I found a bunch of videos that talk about David Foster Wallace's stance on irony, and they all tend to explain this in the same way, where they'll bring up cynical, ironic shows like Seinfeld or South Park, and then compare them to newer shows like Parks and Rec or Brooklyn Nine-Nine, with the implication that things are better now that we're more sincere on TV. And it seems to me like the fact that we're now seeing TV shows that argue for sincerity over irony and yet nothing has really changed seems like evidence that at best Wallace was wrong, and at worst the situation may have gotten so much worse. But also, irony has its uses. In his essay, DFW criticizes it for only being destructive, saying that
irony, entertaining as it is, serves an exclusively negative function. It's critical and deconstructive, a ground clearing. Surely this is the way our postmodern fathers saw it, but irony is singularly unuseful when it comes to constructing anything to replace the hypocrisies it debunks.
And I don't totally disagree with that point, but even still, some things do genuinely deserve to be destroyed. In an essay titled How Irony Moved from the TV to the Internet, the philosopher Matthew McKeever argues that the de-ironization of TV has also led to its depoliticization. There's nothing wrong with wholesome and absurd comedy, but if your goal is to criticize systems of oppression, you're probably going to want something with a bit more edge to it. To show you what I mean, let's think about those shows that always get held up for their positivity, Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Both shows were created by Michael Schur and are generally praised for being wholesome and sincere. Also, to be clear, I think that both of them are pretty funny. But with that said, there is something very striking about how, despite their explicitly political subject matter, neither show engages in particularly biting commentary and instead portrays an optimistic vision for individual incremental reforms over radical systemic change. While I do genuinely think that in a lot of ways both shows have their hearts in the right place, Parks and Rec presents an Aaron Sorkin liberal fantasy where anyone's mind can be changed with one good speech, and liberals and conservatives aren't really so different since they both just want the best for everyone.
What religion am I? Well, I'm a practicing none of your business.
Capitalism is the only way, Leslie. It's what makes America great. And England okay, and France terrible.
I like capitalism, and I just want to say thank you.
Well, you are very welcome.
It's about time
We stop those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel.
You're very handsome.
Whereas while Brooklyn Nine-Nine criticizes some aspects of the police and prison system in America in ways that do actually go further than what you normally see on network TV, let alone in a sitcom.
The only people less popular in here than cops are snitches.
Well, let's be honest, it's not great in here for trans people.
However, their message is still one of extremely small-scale incrementalism, as Skip Intro points out in his great video about Brooklyn Nine-Nine and the politics of Michael Schur.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine isn't really using its comedy to satirize the police. It's using it to present a pleasant version of them that doesn't reflect reality.
And I think that the pleasant fantasy that these shows present is directly related to their use of sincerity over cutting irony. Like, it's always interesting to me how the type of people I most often see identifying as wholesome online tend to be extremely left-wing, when, by definition, the word wholesome refers to moral health and purity. Sorry, we're talking about David Foster Wallace here. Let's switch to the OED. Yeah, point still stands. And like, I'm obviously not saying that there's anything conservative about being morally or physically healthy, but it seems to me that a politics based on wholesomeness is one that doesn't lend itself particularly well to radically changing the status quo. And I think that you can very clearly see this played out in Wallace's writing, which leaned decidedly shitlib in its politics. For instance, you can look at the profile he wrote of John McCain during his 2000 presidential run, in which, despite cringing at McCain's deranged conservative politics, Wallace mostly praises him for his sincerity, as well as the realness and courage it must have taken for him to survive in a POW camp. Or you can just look in E Unibus Plurum, where DFW talks about the destructive role of irony and postmodernism like this.
Think, if you will, for a moment, of third world rebels and coups. Rebels are great at exposing and overthrowing corrupt, hypocritical regimes, but seem noticeably less great at the mundane, non-negative tasks of then establishing a superior governing alternative. Victorious rebels, in fact, seem best at using their tough, cynical rebel skills to avoid being rebelled against themselves. In other words, they just become better tyrants.
Like, this is not a guy who'd be particularly out of place in the writer's room for West Wing. You know, except for how he was a good writer and, like, smart. But crucially here, all ironic dunking aside, I don't think that Wallace is wrong in terms of how irony can act as a wrecking ball that destroys without creating anything new. The problem is that without clearing away the old, all that sincerity can do is put a glossy finish over top of what's already there. Also, just to be fair here, while this conclusion tends to get a lot of attention, most of the essay is Wallace critiquing irony, with this thrown in at the end in a way that, to me, reads as him just sort of spitballing. Ultimately though, while I agree with Wallace in believing that we can find a solution to this in art, it seems to me that the issue is in thinking that a different affect is all it takes to cleanse mass media and turn our copious consumption into a good thing. Ironically, this actually sounds a lot like what McCoy and Scarborough argue that irony viewers are doing, changing the context of their consumption habits in order to make the content they consume acceptable. Also, like, even just on a basic level, I think that it's far from a given that making sincere content will be a net positive across the board. For example, what would sincere reality TV be? I think it'd look a lot like the shows that I mentioned at the beginning, and as wild and admittedly entertaining as they are, do we really want more families torn apart on MILF Manor or new music from Sheena Shea? The problem with this is that, in reality, the shows I've been talking about are more than happy to be engaged with by people on any point of the ironic to sincere spectrum. The only thing they actually care about is that we keep watching. Arguably, this is the thing that makes them trash in the first place. They appeal to everyone's most base interests. Netflix has just taken this to the next level by also making them appeal to any style of interpretation. Now, at this point, I should address the fact that I'm in some pretty dangerous territory here. This is something that you see whenever video essayists bring up the concept of recuperation, which is the way that capitalism, or in this case just ideology more broadly, will absorb criticisms and then repackage them as products to be sold back to us. The reason that this is dangerous is that literally anytime I see video essayists bring this up, they always have this awkward moment where they have to acknowledge that this criticism applies to their video too, and that they don't really have an answer to that issue.
I cannot get around the fact that true crime and scandal is popular not because people have been tricked into thinking it's the most ethical product, it's because it is what draws their attention. I'm definitely aware of this as someone who makes videos on a site that is increasingly fueled by online drama content and feels constantly reminded by how much more engagement I'd be getting if I made that the focus of my channel.
People can enjoy Barbie, but this insistence on just letting people have fun is honestly something corporations would love for us to be telling each other.
Big corporations see the value in authenticity, even manufactured authenticity like Man About Cake or this. Old companies will pay a lot of money for brands that can successfully sell authenticity, and entire newer corporations have molded their marketing strategy around the faith viewers have in the authenticity of their favorite YouTuber or their favorite podcaster. Companies like Casper, Audible, and of course, Squarespace. This video was brought to you by Squarespace.
Now, all of those people are way smarter than me, but I happen to have more hubris than all of them combined, so I'm gonna at least try to give more of an answer here than just shrugging my shoulders and playing a mid-roll ad. See, a lesser creator would have put an ad there as a joke, but not me, because I have integrity. And also, Netflix is copyright claiming the shit out of this video. Please subscribe to my Patreon. I didn't know I was supposed to register as a business, and so taxes were brutal this year. So, starting with critiques of capitalism, while I don't have a definitive answer, my personal take is that this issue becomes a lot easier when we stop thinking that watching a video like this one is some sort of revolutionary act. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm proud of what I do and know that I've helped educate people as well as push them further left. And I'm not even that good compared to lots of other people doing this stuff. With that said, as I've stated multiple times before, this channel is edutainment, and any content creator who claims to be some kind of leftist thought leader or that the revolution will happen once they reach a certain Patreon goal is delusional and/or a grifter. But while I'm pretty skeptical of any YouTuber's ability to trigger revolutionary change, I'd also say that it's a mistake to think that there's zero impact to this stuff too. This can be for good or bad, as in the case of Toxic Irony, where it seems clear to me that making or consuming this stuff must in some ways contribute to its prevalence. By the way, this is what David Foster Wallace means when he says that TV criticism doesn't take TV seriously enough. The content that we consume obviously has an effect on us, and one that we should be very critical of.
Culture-wise, shall I spend much of your time pointing out the degree to which televisual values influence the contemporary mood of jaded Weltschmerz, self-mocking materialism, blank indifference, and the delusion that cynicism and naivety are mutually exclusive? Can we deny connections between an unprecedentedly powerful consensual medium that suggests no real difference between image and substance, and the rise of Teflon presidencies, the establishment of nationwide tanning and liposuction industries, the popularity of voguing to a bad Marilyn imitator's synthesized command to strike a pose?
Just to be clear here, some of that quote is fully just boomer shouts at cloud shit, and also like kind of sexist and homophobic, right? Like, personally, I don't think that the biggest issue of the 90s was people dancing to Madonna, but okay man, cool. That said, in the same way that TV obviously has played a role in spreading like diet culture as we know it today, I think that the prevalence of hate-watching content and gleeful teardowns clearly does to some extent perpetuate the cynical and ironic attitudes that are so omnipresent online, despite everyone seeming to recognize them as being insanely toxic and antisocial. And look, I'm not your dad, except for you, Ferbert. I'm proud of you, son. But for the rest of you, I'm not gonna tell you what you should or shouldn't watch or even make, and I like a lot of content by people who do like what is essentially hate watch stuff. But for me personally, despite how well it does in the algorithm, I've gotten a bit tired of shooting fish in a barrel, and so this is going to be the end of the reality TV series for me. Thanks for watching. Unless my channel starts doing badly, then it's straight back to Dunktown, baby!
Thank you.